day at a Home Depot, in this case, making off with $18,000 in power tools.
So, as New York City wrestles with increasing crime and rioting, there's even more illegal activity happening behind the scenes. Because while distracted law enforcement has its hands full, career criminals, some of whom are here illegally, won't let this crisis go to waste and are clearing out superstores and shopping centers without anyone trying to stop them.
Heist after heist carried out hundreds of times in chain hardware superstores across the Northeast. A 13-member crew charged with stealing merchandise worth an estimated $2.2 million, sold on the black market.
8 men have been indicted on charges of conspiracy and grand larceny for a 6 heist of beef, lamb, cheese, copper, including the accused mastermind, who is also wanted by immigration and back in his home country of Uzbekistan.
We believe that at least some of the food was meant for grocery stores, like a Costco, for example. And when food orders go missing and shelves are empty, prices go up.
This man is seen on store security video tossing CO detectors by the dozens into a garbage container, then without paying a penny, rolled it out of the store.
Sometimes doing the same Home Depot 4 times in one day.
This is the largest bust of a retail theft ring in the history of Queens.
Who would have thought that in a sanctuary state we'd have theft rings run by people who aren't supposed to be here? But what nobody's talking about is even though some of these guys are getting caught clearing out places like Home Depot on a regular basis, that is not going to stop the crime that's taking place. In fact, it's only going to get worse. Because you see, it's one thing to take down a bunch of kingpins, but the roots of their operation are still out there. And while we've got these high-profile busts with massive dollar amounts attached to them, the theft infrastructure that obtained all of these items and sold them off is still out there looking for more. Which leads us to the ultimate I told you so moment for New York City, because here we've been thinking this entire time that, oh, if we would just decriminalize theft and things like that, the world would be a better place, which is what they tell us, but what isn't actually true. Because even though the masterminds of this operation are headed off to jail for a very long time, everyone doing the actual stealing from places like Home Depot, Target, you name it, those folks are still out there. And places for them to offload their goods are still out there, because while stealing is still a crime and will result in a consequence eventually once the dollar amount gets high enough, you can sell whatever you want on the nearest street corner, which means anybody can throw down a blanket on a sidewalk and undercut Home Depot with their own products for 70% off. And that brings us to the real reason New York still has a massive shoplifting problem. Taking down the kingpins means nothing if you've got this whole criminal infrastructure out there that's just waiting for somebody else to come along and assume control of it. And how did we get here? Well, our socialist leaders look at the people breaking the law on the streets of the city and don't blame their actions at all. No, but instead they see them as victims of an affordability crisis, which explains why, in their minds, people are selling things they didn't pay for. They need money to pay their rent. They need money to buy their groceries. And although that might be true, paying your rent and buying your groceries when it's your job to rob grocery stores just jacks up prices for the law-abiding, fueling the unaffordability crisis, which was the excuse to decriminalize these open-air theft markets. And that's what these are. A few months ago, vendors were told they could sell whatever they want on a street corner, and there's not going to be anything other than a fine, if there's a fine. And we wonder why crime is out of control like this. Watch.
Suffolk County District Attorney says brazen thefts were caught on camera. Investigators say the same alleged thieves came back day after day after day at a Home Depot, in this case, making off with $18,000 in power tools.
So we got a group of people stealing from Home Depot constantly. Tools, drills, you name it. And where does that stuff end up? Well, it can end up on the internet or on the nearest street corner, and we've got proof that it is. But $18,000, that's nothing compared to what criminals did just a few months ago. Watch.
Rolls of electrical wiring worth $150 each, spray foam insulation, outlets, hammers, and air conditioners, and the list goes on. A 13-member crew charged with stealing merchandise worth an estimated $2.2 million, sold on the black market.
Millions of dollars went out the door, at these Home Depots all over the Northeast just because criminals residing in New York City, being protected by New York City, had a home base to plan all this stuff. And while it's great to see these criminals getting taken down, the entire apparatus underneath them hasn't gone anywhere. We're talking 8 people in one heist, 13 people in another heist. You need hundreds of people stealing from stores on a regular basis if you want to sustain an operation like this. And I've seen it with my own eyes. Unmarked vans pull up in certain parts of town and immediately start being unloaded, with briefcases being hauled out of these things and rollaway suitcases, which are then handed to people who space themselves out on a sidewalk and all seem to be selling the exact same things from stores like Home Depot, still in their original retail packaging. By the way, this stuff happens in neighborhoods where you'll see gang-related paraphernalia on buildings for groups like MS-13 who've decided for some reason that the largest sanctuary city in America is a great place to set up shop because nothing will ever apparently be done to stop them. And wait till you hear how many stores these criminals are going after.
From here, driving to stores in 9 Northeast states, hitting 128 separate Home Depot stores. We asked shoppers for their reactions to this meticulously planned scheme.
Yeah, the very big surprise.
Send them to jail and do their time.
So 128 Home Depots all over the Northeast. This is no longer just a New York City problem. Instead, we've got New York City, which is a sanctuary city, which has laws that protect criminals no matter where they're from and release them and get them back out on the streets as soon as possible. And crimes being premeditated and planned here now affect surrounding states. The entire Northeast is at risk because of what's being allowed to happen right here. That is frightening. But it gets even worse because the other thefts you're about to see shortly threaten even more of the country than just the Northeast and are even more sophisticated than people robbing Home Depot, filling up dumpsters with the stuff on the shelves and walking out without paying for anything, even the dumpster. But before we get to that, you got to understand that if criminals are allowed to have a home base somewhere and operate in the open and the laws that we have here protect those people, that is going to be a problem that grows and grows and grows, which is the opposite of what we're told with decriminalization. We're told decriminalization makes everything better. We're told that if people get caught stealing and we let them off the hook and give them unlimited second chances, eventually they'll just conclude not to do it anymore. But no, here we have professional criminals. How do you become a professional criminal? Well, you gain experience. You figure out you can do something over and over again as if it's your full-time job, and boom, it becomes your full-time job and destroys the society around you. And this is all magnified by the fact that now anything that gets stolen from a CVS or a Walmart or a Target, it can make its way to the streets of New York City, to a street corner in a busy intersection and vanish for 100% profit, even if it's sold for 50% off. And if the police do go out and decide to enforce the now civil law violation of selling things you're not supposed to without any permits, those are the only costs the sellers of these goods incur. They don't pay rent, they don't pay utilities, they don't even pay for the stuff on the blankets. But then there's another question. If the people who are selling things don't produce identification or don't have it, since this is now a civil offense, who even gets the ticket for this fine? Is there even a consequence at all for this activity? Well, there's not. And as you're about to see, when you protect lawlessness at the lowest level, crime rises to new levels nobody ever thought possible.
8 men have been indicted on charges of conspiracy and grand larceny for a 6 heist of beef, lamb, cheese, copper, and cigarettes dating from last October to April. 3 of the suspects were arraigned in a lower Manhattan courtroom Wednesday afternoon, including the accused mastermind, who is also wanted by immigration and back in his home country of Uzbekistan.
We allege that the defendants impersonated legitimate trucking companies that were contracted to ship large orders of goods around the country. Instead of delivering the goods, we allege they stole them.
Okay, so here we've got a multi-million-dollar theft ring that didn't even bother going into the store to rob the store. No, instead, they went to where the products that wind up on the store's shelves, like at a Costco, end up coming from. They went to the distributors and they robbed the distributors. That way they don't have to compete with all of the criminals that are robbing the stores. No, they're ahead of the game here and they're taking truckloads of merchandise. Think about that, truckloads, and just diverting them to their theft warehouses somewhere, and then that stuff is getting resold somewhere. And they did this by impersonating the very trucking companies that were expected to pick up these goods and ship them out, something they were able to do by using hackers to get into the shipping databases, figuring out which carrier is supposed to show up, masquerading as that carrier, showing all the fake paperwork, and boom, the truck gets loaded up. But it's actually the criminals who are taking everything away. And where do you think the headquarters of this operation were? Put your seatbelt on because you're about to be shocked. Not really.
In this case, we allege the defendants interrupted this process by maintaining relationships with sophisticated hacking groups who use phishing scams to impersonate legitimate trucking businesses, and then bids were placed in the names of those businesses. They would go and they would show up to the manufacturer, and then they would present an invoice like this here, again, using the name, impersonating a legitimate shipping company. Once they did that, we were looking at this map here, starting from pickups from a manufacturer, then they did sort of fan out, and this is just illustrative fan out, and coming through New York City, you see, and then instead of
wow. So not only do you have millions of dollars in goods being given directly to criminals, you've got the information used by these businesses, the private information of employees, login credentials, the inner workings of these companies have just been totally taken over by criminals. That's destroying these businesses. They're not going to survive if we allow theft like this to continue, because an entire truckload of goods, I mean, that's going to clear you out. This is warfare on another level against our country, and it's organized crime, and it's being enabled and sponsored by a city that doesn't think punishing criminals, if they don't steal enough or if they're not the ones running the operation, isn't worth it. And now we have these operations. And the worst part about it is this stuff wasn't headed for New York City supermarkets exclusively. It was headed all across the country from distributors that just so happened to be located within reach of this gang. And if the crimes being planned and committed in New York City start affecting other states, start affecting the entire Northeast, start affecting the entire East Coast, I mean, the entire country is under threat from this sort of thing. And this needs to be taken seriously. And it all starts because we're not willing to punish the people who start out as shoplifters and become full-time criminals and then end up graduating and building their own crime operations because this city lets them do it. Ask yourself, is that a good idea? Absolutely not. This is bad for our entire country, even if the local leaders here think it's good for New York City for some reason.
And I mentioned this, but I want to underscore it. What is very disturbing here is that the victims, the direct victims of the alleged conspiracy, the owners of the goods and the legitimate shipping companies had no idea this was occurring.
Wow.
Until after the damage was done.
Yeah, I had no idea.
These crime networks are widespread. There is reason to believe there are other crews operating in the same fashion throughout the Northeast.
Oh, there's others.
Our investigation into this particular matter is continuing, and more broadly.
So there's other gangs out there doing the exact same thing. This is not some sort of one-off. This is not some freak incident where you had some exceptionally smart criminals who were doing something nobody else had ever thought of. No, there's other groups out there copying them and emulating them right now. And where do you think we're going to find those groups? Do you think we're going to find them in a place that punishes crime, or do you think we're going to find them in a place that lets criminals run free? And the sad reality here is you've got regular New Yorkers paying the price for this criminal behavior every single day, because even if the supermarkets getting robbed aren't in New York City, but the goods are, now you're erasing jobs from the local economy. Now you're giving money to criminals who will be able to afford groceries and be able to afford rent, which you yourself cannot afford. And remember, nobody starts out as a criminal mastermind. They start out as somebody who just decides to take things from CVS and walk out the door without paying, which affects people here in their day-to-day life in ways nobody's talking about.
First, stolen goods means higher prices.
Yes, it does. Thank you.
We believe that at least some of the food was meant for grocery stores, like a Costco, for example. And when food orders go missing and shelves are empty, prices go up.
Right.
Second, many of the suppliers and trucking companies are small businesses. with employees ranging from one employee to about 20. We're not talking here about multinational conglomerates. It can be hard to sustain these types of losses. Insurance may cover some, it may not.
If you even have it.
And that means that some of these businesses may not recover financially.
Right. So they're wiping out the small businesses, the logistics companies that are the ones getting robbed here and have their systems hacked into. Those companies are gone. Those jobs are gone. There's nothing affordable about having your job deleted by criminal hackers who steal all the goods from your warehouse and sell those on their own. Absolutely not. This is totally unsustainable. This is horrible for the local economy. And we've got this idea behind shoplifting that if somebody goes into a Walgreens or goes into a Home Depot and steals a few things, oh, it's a victimless crime. Oh, people have insurance. Look, insurance doesn't last forever. There's deductibles. Get robbed often enough, nobody will insure you. That's how insurance works. They're not sticking around to pay out claims forever from unlimited numbers of criminals committing unlimited crime inside your store or inside your business. And it's tough to get insurance for a sophisticated type of crime and intrusion you don't even know is out there. We're literally creating criminals in New York City that are more advanced than these businesses are prepared for. We heard that from the DA right here that these businesses, they thought they were making money. They're shipping out the goods. They're sending invoices. They think they're about to get paid, but really they just lost everything. And even though we hear a lot about affordability in these deep blue strongholds that have insane rent and insane prices because they're just trying to keep up with the crime taking place there, these guys that were robbing these warehouses and diverting all of these goods, where were they selling those goods? Well, some of it was getting sold on the internet, which means these guys were undercutting legitimate businesses operating in other states. Think about that for a second. There are victims of crime in New York City who aren't even in New York City and have no plans to ever come to a place like this, but they're getting their livelihoods destroyed. They don't even know why. They just think competition's real tough. They see other people undercutting them on the internet, undercutting them on Amazon potentially. Oh, how did they get such low prices? Oh, well, I guess we got to lower our prices. Or, oh, I guess we're not going to sell as much. This is plundering the legitimate economy of our country in ways that nobody wants to investigate. Because once you start investigating it, it becomes pretty obvious that the only solution to shoplifting is to build jails and fill them up. What do you think about that? I'll see you in the next video. Ilhan Omar is up to something.
Minnesota Congresswoman Ilhan Omar is facing the heat again for her latest reported filings on her income. And this time, it's a lot lower than previous listings, revealing that her family was worth millions.
Omar's husband, Tim Minette, once listed his net worth to be up to $30 million in 2024. And that caused a push for an investigation into the business holdings of the couple. But that ended up being a clerical mistake, according to the Congresswoman. Instead, a new filing has listed her assets between $20,000 and $125,000.
How stupid does she think America is?
He's a very smart guy. Did a great job. You know, when I look at the Democrats, I call them the Democrats. They're dumb. The Democrats. When I watched that, where one of them thought it was World War XI. She said World War XI. She read World War II. You know about that, right? This is one of their potential leaders. Ilhan Omar, who married her brother to get into the country, by the way, illegally. But when I watch AOC, have no idea, on a simple question, what happened when she was over in Switzerland, which she probably never went there before, but she was. And then I watch somebody like JD or Marco. I said, what a difference. What a difference. What a difference a brain makes.
Mr. President. Well, Ilhan Omar is hoping you and the people investigating her don't have one and can't do basic math. Watch this.
Let's go back to May 2025. The original financial disclosure claimed assets up to $30 million, a $5 million winery, a venture capital firm worth $25 million, earnings $15,000 from the winery, $0 from the venture capital firm. Then there was an amended financial disclosure filed in March of this year. The assets were wiped out, basically, from the winery and the venture capital firm. But
How?
suddenly, look at this. There's $1 million income from the venture capital firm. And then this newly amended financial disclosure filed back in May the 13th of 2026. The winery and the venture capital firm continue to be zeroed out in terms of assets. The venture capital income suddenly went from $1 million to zero, and the winery became reduced to...
Look at the timeline here. In May last year, lots of money. Then in March, when the investigations and all the scrutiny started, no more money, $5,000 in income, and $1 million from the venture capital. But then the investigations kept going, and now we're down to nothing, $1,000, and no money. So a firm that a year ago was making $25 million, or had a $25 million valuation, and then was making $1 million, now has $0 valuation and makes no money. That's fascinating. How does that work? And the fact that there's two disclosures here, March and then again in May, means that people didn't just make one clerical error. I thought I made $25 million and it was actually only $1 million. It was actually nothing. Yeah. Pretty soon it'll be negative money. She'll make negative money. Then she'll really be poor.
It was $200 for the year. I pointed out at the top, all of this was blamed on a accounting error.
Yes.
So they've either given the accountant bad information, or they hired the most incompetent accountant ever.
But,
QuickBooks would get that.
I give my 5-year-old an allowance, and it seems to me like she actually made more money in the past year than Ilhan Omar's husband. No, I do think
they probably accounted for it.
Yeah, and actually accounted for it better. Yeah, she spent it mostly on Legos.
Jokes aside, how much trouble is she really in? Is anything going to happen, or is this just another one of those crime is legal scenarios in America?
We're going to jump right in with Omar's shady finances. So, Alex, just to recap, her finances have gone like this. Like a sinusoidal curve you see in high school trigonometry. How much trouble is she in legally?
I mean,
because you can't lie on these documents.
Where there is smoke, and there's definitely a lot of smoke, there's fire.
It's like the Palisades of LA level fire.
I don't know how you go from being valued at 30 million or so to then saying that you made 200, possibly, maybe 1,000 in a year.
Right.
Lots of red flags. If I was Ilhan Omar, I would be wanting to get a new CPA and probably a new husband, because I'm not sure.
Well, she's on like her 12.
A new husband.
You know,
like, come on,
poor Tim.
Who could survive on that figure, 200 to 1,000? That just does not pass the smell test, right? And I think that there's a lot going on here. I'm not surprised with, in the past, when we talked about how she kind of snubbed the Minnesota lawmakers, trying to subpoena her, get her to talk about what happened with all the fraud investigation, that she doesn't want to talk. Or I'm sure her lawyers are like, stay quiet.
So, Daniel, I believe that this current husband, her husband's and her finance.
Okay, the smoking piece of evidence here is the fact that the first revision happened right when the investigations started. And then another one happened 2 months later when they got worse. That's weird. Now, of course, it's not evidence of wrongdoing, but it's evidence of something, and people just want to know what it is.
This is her political consultant husband, right?
I think so.
Tim Minette. Okay.
And
so
always marry your political consultant.
Well, maybe she's going to marry her CPA.
Then they leak on you.
Right,
especially if they don't charge you.
Well, so here's the thing. What I'm wondering is, do you think that there is anything that Ilhan Omar could do that would make Democrats say, all right, we're going to pump the brakes? Every 2 years, about 40% of the Democrats in her district vote for someone else. But nationally, obviously, she is one of their top figures. Do you think she could do anything that would make them say, we're going to second guess this massive embrace we've done of her?
No. Well, I wouldn't call it a massive embrace. This is a person who, in these times, if you go viral on social media, then you become a famous figure in politics. But that doesn't necessarily mean that she's going to be some huge surrogate for Democrats this year in battleground midterm elections, or even for president. I just highly doubt that John Ossoff is going to be like, oh, I'm going to use her all the time on the campaign trail. He's going to use all people who don't have these types of scandals, obviously.
Interesting.
Do you think that?
But it's not a scandal to the people who defend her and agree with her viewpoints on America being the biggest problem in the world and Trump being the biggest problem ever to set foot in the White House. I mean, these are people that hear of someone whose net worth went from $30 million to $0, and they say, well, they're not lying, it's Trump. Trump's the problem, and she stands up to Trump, just like Gavin Newsom, just like Mayor Mamdani, just like AOC. And you know what? That absolves these individuals of any wrongdoing. They can do no wrong. They can do whatever they want. They can have 25 million, 30 million. Trump's the problem.
Democrats will shy away from I mean, remember, Republicans wanted her kicked off committees. You know, she is a hot button issue. Do you think that there will ever be a bridge that she crosses that Democrats are saying, all right, that's enough?
Matthew, I'm waiting for Democrats to come out and say that alcohol and liquor and wine sales are down. And that's what they're blaming it on. You go from millions of dollars to $200, and they're like, well, there's your reason.
Right.
No. And then basically the point is you have Graham Plattner coming in with the tattoo. You would have thought he would have been sacked a long time ago. So I don't think there's any.
There's really no.
Donald Trump. Right. He's actually got a really good point. They're putting him down. But look, Trump was the victim of a whole bunch of fake scandals and fake news and fake court cases and fake lawsuits. All this stuff happened to him, and he survived. And now the people that are actually engaged in crime can say, well, if the biggest criminal of them all is still a free man, how guilty can I be? I mean, we know Trump has done worse, right? Even though he hasn't.
Trying to have
And we can't take a bad photo. Ilhan Omar, she can take plenty of bad photos.
She take a lot.
And we also know where the money comes from with Trump. It's hotels. He had a real business. Ilhan Omar.
Well, here there is no money, though. They had no
Right.
business, so at least they have
He's
no
a
money.
businessman.
But I do want to remind our viewers, look up Gavin Newsom's winery. He got into it with the Getty Oil family. Very funny to go from that to champagne socialist.
The thing that I think is disturbing about this is, again, we do not have enough financial transparency about all of these things.
Right.
The amount of insider trading that's gone on in Congress, the amount of ways that people have hidden money, hidden assets, that they have, financial ability. Frankly, from my perspective, it's a security risk because they can be compromised by other nations that are fueling money to them or that are paying for the things that they enjoy in life.
Right, totally.
We need more transparency in government, period. And I think that includes particularly Ilhan Omar.
Absolutely. The fact that people are allowed to hide their wealth and make up numbers or put wildly inaccurate numbers, 25 million here, 0 million here. Oh, let's change the numbers around every single year. There's like no clear path. I wonder what her tax return shows. If her tax return shows that she paid taxes on $25 million of net worth, and then the next year, $1 million of income coming in? Did she pay taxes on that? If she did, she should be asking for a refund. We have no idea. Oh, but it's Trump that needs to release his tax returns. Oh, we need to see what's going on with Trump. Biggest criminal in the White House. See what he's up to. But just before we continue, quick question. How much control do you have over your money right now? Technology has changed everything, and now it's changing how money works. Crypto started as a niche, but now it's going mainstream. Faster payments, more control, fewer middlemen. This isn't hype. It's where things are going. And getting started today is easier than you think with Rumble Wallet. You can buy Bitcoin, hold dollar-backed stablecoins, even own digital gold backed by real gold, all in one place. It's a non-custodial crypto wallet, which means you, not a bank, not some exchange somewhere, are the only one controlling access to your funds. Setup is simple. Rumble Wallet connects to MoonPay, so you can use your debit card, credit card, or bank account and be up and running in minutes. And for a limited time, you can start your wallet off with $10 in stablecoin USDT by downloading Rumble Wallet and entering promo code CashJordan10 when you sign up right now. And you can even use Rumble Wallet to tip your favorite Rumble creators like me directly. Here's what you do. See this QR code? Scan this with your phone or click the link in the description of this video, which will take you right here. Wallet.rumble rumble.com/CashJordan. You can download the Rumble Wallet app from there. Enter my promo code CashJordan10 to get your $10 in US stablecoin. This is a limited time offer, so you got to act now. Take control of your money. Get started with Rumble Wallet today. Terms and conditions apply. See the description below or visit rumble.com/promo-official-rules for details.
Well, the walls may be closing in on Minnesota Congresswoman Ilhan Omar. She faces allegations of steering taxpayer money toward fraudulent schemes in her state.
Oh, yeah, that happened too.
Great people, though. House Oversight Committee Chair James Comer detailing the next steps of the investigation.
Oh, the next steps.
And I do think Ilhan Omar is in a lot of trouble. She's got that big question mark on how her net worth jumped up to, at least 6 million and then went back down to zero.
Right.
Over a 1 year period.
So are you saying that Ilhan Omar, the congresswoman from Minnesota, that she was getting federal money and feeding it into these corrupt networks, her cronies?
I think one of the projects she requested was proved to be a fraudulent scheme.
Wow.
Now, we have reached out to Congresswoman Omar's team for comment. We've yet to hear back. We'll let you know if that changes. Meanwhile, a former state employee who was placed on administrative leave is now accusing the Walz administration of ignoring fraud and intimidating whistleblowers. Watch
this is why you have to understand Ilhan Omar has been so brazen about her net worth and was not ashamed to hide it if it was truly $25 million. She put that out there and she put it in disclosures because somebody was supposed to be the vice president of the entire country. And you know how J.D. Vance is out there leading the charge against fraud in America? Are we supposed to think that Tim Walz was going to do the same thing? Or was he going to lead the charge for America to just head into even more fraudulent activity and just saturate the country with schemes everywhere? That was the game plan. Don't think for a second people weren't banking on Tim pulling the levers of all these investigations, and that's what they hoped would happen. They were hoping that would protect them. It didn't, and now all the numbers are coming down. Makes you wonder what their actual net worth would have been if Tim was in. Then they would have put out the real numbers.
The smear campaign starts where you are told that you are racist, and then your job duties are lessened until you basically have no job duties.
It's terrible.
There is just a continuous effort to stifle you, to shut you up. And it is impossible to overcome. So to say that leadership was not aware or the governor was not aware.
Right, they knew.
I can tell you that is absolutely false.
Right, they knew, man.
It's legally deadly, Kaylee. Yeah. I mentioned the good people of Minnesota. People deserve better representation than those who will defraud them.
Yes.
You'd think
and
so.
For anyone to say, oh, that's a Republican activist. No, Faye Bernstein, the whistleblower, is a Democrat. And she saw this, and she had a problem with it, because anyone should have a problem with taxpayer money going to fraudsters.
Unless you're a fraudster, then you don't have a problem with it at all. Then you're going to get your candidates out there and have them scream from the rooftops of all the good we're doing and of how we're the most generous state in the country. And that's why we have so much fraud, because we're so generous. Remember, that was Tim Walz's excuse for fraud.
And she has been bold and stood up and has repeatedly said the governor knew about this. How could he not? We have reports. I believe they're Inspector General reports, or at least government documents going back to before he came to office. I'm looking at data from 2015, 35 child care facilities flagged, 2016, 41, 2017, 42 flagged.
Wow.
He comes into office at the beginning of 2019, Governor Walz. There's been ample warning at this point from whistleblowers, from government agencies. And what does he do? He shuts down the government agency that Jay Swanson is working at, and doesn't take this seriously until a young 24, 25-year-old Nick Shirley comes in with a camera.
Right. So then Tim Walz was like, oh, no, I better do something, because now all these investigations that I didn't do happened and went viral. And now I look absolutely red-handed. He's no longer governor. He was going to run for re-election, and he resigned. He went from almost being vice president of the most powerful country in the world to resigning because of fraud. Think about that for a second. Had he been in power, he was the guy all the scammers in America were betting on was going to protect them. And you know who that also includes?
The DOJ is allegedly investigating California Governor Gavin Newsom and his wife, with sources saying the probe started in 2025 and is based on whistleblower complaints related to their personal finances. Wow. Jennifer Siebel Newsom's nonprofit reportedly took cash from a Native American tribe that operates a casino in the state and was backed by her husband, while her other charity reportedly paid her own private film company directly. But the Newsoms, well, they're pushing back.
Oh, yeah, good.
Donald Trump isn't just coming after me because of my mean tweets. He's coming after me because I'm considering running for president. Because he hates that I've consistently called him out over and over again for his lies and deceit.
That's exactly what Representative Omar says. Trump is obsessed with me. I'm calling him out. I'm resisting him. Therefore, he's investigating me. He's the real criminal.
But just last month, Newsom's former chief of staff, Dana Williamson, pled guilty to federal fraud charges. Joining us now for tonight's big close-up is California Post opinion editor Joel Pollak.
Well, first of all, who knows? It could be politically motivated. John Bolton made that argument, and then he ended up pleading guilty. It doesn't change the facts. And it's been known for a long time that Gavin Newsom and his wife have been tied up in this very shady practice of what we call behested payments. Now, they're legal under California campaign finance law. Basically, politicians ask big money donors to give contributions to nonprofits of their choice. But in Newsom's case, he asked donors to give money to his wife's nonprofit organization. And sometimes these donors were, as you mentioned, the Native American tribe before, they were interests with business before the state. So it raises questions of conflict of interest.
Think about that for a second. In California, you can ask a corporation to make a donation to a charity of your choice, and then that corporation is getting government contracts from the state, which you control. Can you imagine if Trump did this? Can you imagine if Trump told some multinational, massive corporation to donate to a charity run by his kids if he came along and he said, hey, Ford Motor Company, why don't you make a donation to the Trump charity over here? And then all of a sudden, Department of Homeland Security, after this donation is made, they switch out all their Dodge Durangos for Ford Explorers. What about that? Wouldn't that look corrupt? Of course it would. Would people have questions about that? Absolutely. And Governor Gavin Newsom has got a pretty high net worth himself.
That was already out in the open. That's in the public domain.
That's what we know
It's
about.
very shady. What else might be going on in her tax returns, we've yet to find out. But we do
they
know
won't release them.
Gavin Newsom's former chief of staff has pleaded guilty for fraud and corruption, and the rot is pretty thick in Sacramento.
Ouch.
Joel, there's this other organization called the California Protocol Foundation. They pay for basically, Newsom's advertised it as, hey, this is taking some burden away from taxpayers. It pays for stuff like when he goes overseas, his travel overseas for conferences and stuff. We know that he's tried to position himself, I guess, as president in waiting. Is there any impropriety looks there? Like some of the people that are on the board of this or people that have donated to it also doing business with the state of California?
This is so corrupt.
Well, it's hard to know because there's this outside nonprofit that pays for Gavin Newsom's international travel. And if it didn't exist, he might be dipping into state funds to pay for all this travel. You might say Gavin Newsom is very wealthy. He's got a personal fortune in the several dozens of millions of dollars. Certainly he can pay for his own travel.
But he doesn't.
And the state pays for his security. But they've set up this nonprofit organization. We don't know a lot about it. So the question really is, why is he spending so much time and so much money overseas when California has so many pressing issues at home?
That goes back to the question that the investigators, or the commenters rather, when they said we need more transparency because foreign governments or foreign influences could be affecting the decision-making of U.S. politicians. And here Gavin Newsom is in another part of the world when he should be at home fixing California. I think the longer this gets investigated, the more we're going to find out and the more we're going to see other people playing these same types of games, revising statements of financial value that they thought wouldn't raise any eyebrows when the right people were running America. Oh, but they're not. They're not running it now. Now people that want to crack down on fraud are running America. That's bad news for folks that might have done something wrong. What do you think about this? I'll see you in the next video.
Right now, we're watching a live feed that actually shows 8 individuals just crossed the border illegally. So they're trying to see if they get into a vehicle and take off or if they're going to stay on foot.
So the U.S. border is still under assault from people crossing it, flooding our highways as they make their way into the country's interior for purposes that will no doubt fail to improve the United States for both citizens and legal immigrants who make it great, because a great opportunity exists for criminal organizations to make millions, bringing their customers into America while certain politicians fight to reopen the border.
This is huge, a strike on a gang leader in his own country. We've been doing this for a while in South America, Central America, and certainly in Mexico. However, not with this kind of level of unprecedented assistance from the government itself.
This looks like an ordinary electrical store in the United States. But at the back, U.S. police found an opening beneath the tiles. They went down a carefully constructed tunnel which was 17 meters below ground. What ended in San Diego in the United States found an opening across the border in the Mexican city of Tijuana, nearly 600 meters away.
So this is part of our joint operation with Border Patrol, anti-smuggling operation. So preventing them from loading up into a vehicle, agents and the troopers were able to move in, closing on the group. Of course, as you saw when we moved in, everybody just kind of scattered and run.
But they've got tentacles into Chile, into Peru, into Colombia. And when we got that mass exodus, that migration in 2017, 2018 and after from Venezuela, many of these guys snuck themselves into the United States.
So there's work going on to finish securing the U.S. border. And once this happens, getting across it's going to be even tougher. And what nobody's talking about is the reason we've got even more smuggling attempts happening now is because these criminals are under a lot of pressure. They know they're on limited time at the worst possible time. Not for the United States, but rather for these gangs that reside outside of America and seek to exploit it. Because now that a peace plan is on the table in the Middle East, the eyes of the Trump administration are already turning back to our hemisphere, where we are witnessing the transformation of South America into an area of the globe unsafe for any criminal organization, which will allow countries like Venezuela to once again become engines of prosperity for their own people. There is now a full court press on these criminals in South America. There's no country down there where they can hide. Remember, Venezuela, that used to be a sanctuary country run by a cartel, but now that Nicolas Maduro is in a New York City jail and has been extracted, these criminal organizations, they are on the run and they are getting very nervous. And the fugitives you see exploiting our country's border without permission right now know their time is limited. They better act now before the U.S. military can turn even more attention to securing our border and our hemisphere from them, as they do everything they can to make money selling a counterfeit version of the American dream, which is an absolute scam, not just for the people who buy it, but for those inside of our country who think an open border somehow makes it safer or better. Which brings us to another reason we're seeing such a rush of criminal activity at the southern border. There's an effort right now inside America, led by certain politicians, to reopen that border. And what a better example of why it should be reopened than people who want to come here and can't. And this is supposed to turn the American people against the idea of border security. Even though, according to recent polling, most people living in this country want to see the powers that be come together on an issue that everyone thinks is important. But the fascinating thing happening now is that radical politicians intent on remaking America in their socialist image, they're not moderating their positions at all. If anything, they're doubling down on the idea of no borders, which is music to the ears of smugglers and criminals who are now doing things to get into the country that defy logic and imagination. Watch. That's wild. 39 people were in the back of that truck, and that's recent footage. And America is full of trucks. There are millions of these things on the road, and this one just so happened to have almost 40 people in it who weren't supposed to be here at all. And the only reason it got here was with the help of a criminal organization. But now the question is, how are these criminals crossing the border to begin with and bringing people in? And just how easy is it to get across where there's not a wall just yet?
So this is part of our joint operation with Border Patrol, anti-smuggling operation. So they had seen, or they had a group of 8 that was on one of our drones that was capturing them. So preventing them from loading up into a vehicle, agents and the troopers were able to move in, close in on the group. Of course, as you saw, when we moved in, everybody just kind of scattered and run different directions. But now with all the resources that we have dedicated to border security, more agents in the field, more troopers working together, they closed them in, and they were able to apprehend 5.
Wow. So would you consider that a success?
It is.
Awesome.
Because you got to look at it this way. I mean, those are potential gotaways. So we just know even one gotaway is critical to border security, national security, because you don't know exactly who that person is, why they're coming across, why they're trying to, go undetected.
Right.
So when you're able to apprehend 5, and of course working together, really shows the critical work that's so important with our border mission as we keep ongoing with Operation Lone Star, part of the governor's initiative. Cartels are always going to change their tactics, they're always going to adapt to what we're doing, and I think you saw that today. Of course, we've seen that in previous events, especially when it pertains to commercial vehicles, where you have 20 in a commercial truck, most recently 39.
He just mentioned the 39-person commercial trucking bust that we just looked at. So this is still happening. He says 20, 30 people in a truck. This is normal. It's happening. But he also mentioned that these cartels are changing up their tactics. And just as the individuals that were fleeing were tracked down with the help of a drone, these criminal organizations, they've got drones too. And that's how they spot the right moment in their minds to try and make a break to cross the border. They are monitoring law enforcement on the U.S. side of the border, just as law enforcement is monitoring them. And what you have at the border is basically a standoff. A Cold War, if you want to call it that, of people trying to use intelligence to subvert each other and to get around each other and to capture each other. And as you're about to see, going over the border or going across on land, that's not the only thing these criminal organizations are up to. Watch.
This looks like an ordinary electrical store in the United States.
Sure.
But at the back, U.S. police found an opening beneath the tiles.
Oh, yeah?
They went down a carefully constructed tunnel, which was 17 meters below ground.
Wow.
The structure had steps going down, a ventilation system, and even a power supply.
Well, it's an
Police
electrical
used an
store.
electric cart on tracks which were laid.
Look at this.
What ended in San Diego in the United States found an opening across the border in the Mexican city of Tijuana, nearly 600 meters away.
Look at that.
The discovery came after a long investigation. For 6 months, U.S. police monitored the electrical store in the United States.
Wow.
Until one day they saw a large...
Wow. So you had people at an electronics store who were up to something. The U.S. authorities knew there was something going on here. They knew there was something fishy, but they needed a reason to go in and make some arrests. Then they got that reason, and what they discovered was this pipeline between the U.S. and Mexico that went underneath all of the border infrastructure out there and let people come into America. Who knows how many individuals traversed this thing, what their plans were, what they were up to once they got here, who they may have brought into the country along with them. It's very frightening to think that stuff like this is happening in what looked like legitimate businesses. That place was masquerading as an electronics store. There were probably people going in there to get their refrigerator fixed. And obviously, a tunnel like this isn't going to work for smuggling massive numbers of people into the country that are paying tens of thousands of dollars each. That's not going to happen through one of these. But what would criminals need a tunnel like this for? Well, if you've got criminal operations on the U.S. side of the border and on the other side of the border, what happens is you need people who are going to monitor those operations. And that's how these high-level cartel operatives get into the country. This tunnel's for one person or a small group of people to come into the country to keep tabs on other operations these gangs have going. And that's what these cartels need. They need a way to traverse the border because that's how they make their money. And that's how they run these operations. That's how these criminals are even inside the country to begin with and can seemingly come and go at will. And here we have a specific example of that. Here we have a vehicle. All of the occupants of the vehicle left. The vehicle just came. What? Oh, look, see they're running? But who's driving this vehicle? Who's in here? Wait till you see. Looked at a residential neighborhood. Here come the officers. Oh, look at that truck right there. Oh, inside someone's garage. Look at this guy. Look at this guy. Wait till you see who he is.
Smuggling of persons and reckless driving offense.
This guy, he is a confirmed Gulf Cartel member. And he was just arrested in a smuggling bust. Now, what would a confirmed cartel member be doing running around the interior of the United States of America? Well, it's simple. They're here leading a criminal operation. In this case, they were doing the smuggling themselves. But in other cases, these people are here to keep tabs on the quote unquote customers that they bring into the country. Because you see, the people coming across, they have to pay massive amounts of money to these criminal organizations that they do not have. Cartels do not work on the honor system. They'll bring people into the country with a promise that that money is going to get paid back. And how does it get paid back? Well, it gets paid back because you have enforcer characters like this gentleman watching and making sure that people are illegally working and are illegally earning money, which then gets sent back to these groups, empowering them, which can sometimes take years. I mean, some of these debts are $10,000, $20,000. And obviously a criminal organization that can't enforce its own criminal activity isn't going to last for very long, which explains why you have people like this in the country. They are here to make sure things keep running, and that's bad news for the law-abiding on both sides of the border.
You got a drone out with a drone?
In this video, you can see FBI agents armed with guns go inside the St. Peter's home on Park Charles Boulevard South Tuesday morning. That's an agent screaming, "Hands up," in Spanish. A witness who took this video said agents arrested 20 people.
20 people.
No one answered at the door Thursday morning. Then an hour later, 5 on your side learned 56-year-old Gao Lingyi and Di Zhenyi were charged for bringing in and harboring immigrants living here undocumented. Defendant Gao Lingyi is also the manager of Golden Apple Buffet in St. Charles. One witness said a group of employees would come to work in a van.
So what we have here is we have a corrupt business inside the United States who wants to run itself with people who are not supposed to be in the country. And they've got a smuggling operation going on here, which they can only operate with the help of criminals. And criminals have been busted in areas of Florida running operations that also require a van to bring people to the interior of the country who get dropped off by smugglers that might bring them across the water. And when you combine water-based incursions with incursions on land, that is a tempting proposition for criminal businesses to try and undercut their competitors, to try and have a labor force that they have leverage over. This is all very scary. It's very frightening. It's not helping anybody because the jobs at these businesses should go to people that are here in the United States and are here in a legal capacity and are protected by all of the labor laws that we've fought so hard for in this country that protect workers. But nope, that's not what these guys want to do. They want to run a criminal organization, and this is exactly what it looks like. Here, we have a stash house run by gang members busted by Texas DPS. Look at this.
How y'all doing? Hey, with the state police, hey, everybody's gonna have to leave. They don't want anybody here, okay? Yes, sir. So, who else here? Yeah. Is there anybody else in here?
Looks like a hotel room.
Where are the other people at?
Oh, they're hiding.
He said he's sleeping.
Is there anybody else in here? Who? Is there anybody else? Just y'all? Okay.
It's a lot of people in this hotel room.
There's nobody else in here? Okay. Well, the hotel doesn't want everybody here. Yeah, so we need y'all to come out and we need to see some IDs because y'all aren't allowed. Yeah, they want everybody out of here.
So they know something's up.
That's what I said. The hotel does. The hotel doesn't want you here. It's their property. They have the right to do that.
This?
No.
I'm trying to help.
No, you need to get your stuff. Let's go.
There's a lot of cops outside. Watch. They know what they're walking into. There's something going on here.
Oh, hey.
More people.
Get up.
Oh.
Get up.
Wow.
Hey, come here. Are you Cuban?
Oh.
They don't leave you in.
Smuggling operation.
Hey, get her too. Hook her up.
Oh.
Hey, hook her up for maintaining a stash house. Come over here.
Maintaining a stash house.
Right now, you're under arrest for maintaining a stash house.
This is not a stash house.
Okay, we'll get that.
Not a stash house. We were just sleeping. So we've got some gang members who are here illegally, Look at this. This is crazy, man. This is dangerous. Now, these individuals, if they're criminals and they've come into the country illegally, they'll probably pay off whatever they owe for getting here in an illegal manner as well by doing some heinous thing that would get them arrested and land them in the slammer. This does not help our country at all. And even that hotel that got business for being rented out and used as a stash house temporarily doesn't help them either, because now those criminals are gone and now the reputation of that place is in the tank, because look at what police are uncovering here. And these criminal organizations, the reason they're getting so desperate and the reason they're doing everything they can to get as many people into the country now is because they were making $13 billion a year exploiting the border. But after Trump got elected, all of that stopped. There is no more border exploitation on a massive scale like there was before. And at the exact same time this is happening, the U.S. military is taking steps to secure the rest of Central and South America against these criminals back home, which means they're not safe in America anymore, and they're not safe in what used to be their home base anymore. Watch this.
Here is the Secretary of War yet again, CBS just yesterday. Watch.
Should Americans understand that the U.S. will remain militarily involved in Venezuela? Should they expect similar operations in places like Ecuador and Guatemala, where the U.S. is working with their governments?
It's already happening.
Yes, they should. It's called the America's Counter Cartel Coalition, ACCC, and we're forming it with partner governments all around Central and South America to go after, defeat, and destroy foreign terrorist organizations, cartels. And all those countries you named are stepping up to work on partnerships with the United States.
Okay,
Jim. Wow. So the Counter Cartel Coalition, that's essentially NATO for Central South America and the United States, but without these squabbling European nations that don't want to do anything and don't want to stand up to the bad guys. These are countries that are fully vested in law and order and that are fully invested in protecting their own people and bringing prosperity back to their borders. And you know what stops prosperity? Criminals that earn unlimited amounts of money and can arm themselves and become more powerful than their own local government. That's the problem that the United States has seen in Mexico for decades. A criminal organization or groups of criminal organizations, you have more than one cartel over there that are so strong, the Mexican military and the police are always a few steps behind and maybe outmanned in some cases. But now that's over because you've got governments like Ecuador was mentioned here, El Salvador, all of these other countries, they are so happy to have help from the United States. And what you have is you have U.S. intelligence teaming up with local police and local military who know the streets and who know where these criminals are hiding to take out their operations and make arrests. So these guys, these crooks, they don't have a place to hide anymore. They can't hide in America unless they get to a sanctuary city, then they can try, but they don't have a home base. And if your home base is gone and your offshoots in another country are gone, what's the point of your organization? How do you run a criminal organization like that? You don't. These are getting shut down. And this is a big win for the law-abiding everywhere. It does not help the law-abiding in Mexico or in any country in South America to have criminals that run the place. It doesn't help the law-abiding in the United States to have criminals running businesses and taking jobs out of the workforce and arming themselves and doing things in hotel rooms and breaking our laws every step of the way. The law-abiding suffer everywhere. And if you want to help people, if you really want to help a country, don't open your country's doors and say that there's an asylum crisis and say that everybody can come in. No, make things better in that country. By doing what? By getting rid of the criminals. Then people can live and thrive anywhere. Isn't that good? Isn't that the ideal we should all be fighting for? That's what a closed border does. What do you think about that? I'll see you in the next video. President Trump was asked about the situation in Iran. Look at this.
Mr. President, why are you
The war is going very well. As you know, we're winning by a lot. Iran is making very big concessions. We'll see what happens, but it's been very, very, very powerful. It's going very, very well.
Yeah, hey guys, good morning. Technical discussions between the United States and Iran are set to resume next week, according to the Pakistani Foreign Ministry. The ceasefire between the two countries is moving forward, while a focus remains on the Strait of Hormuz and Iran's nuclear ambitions. This does come as America's top diplomat, Marco Rubio, is in the Middle East to meet with counterparts about the war and the next steps in efforts towards peace. Secretary Rubio indicated again that America prefers the diplomatic track to play out, but there are other options.
The president has multiple options at his disposal if Iran goes back. back on their word, or if Iran decides they don't want to make a deal. Let's hope that's not the case. We don't want that to be the case. We're going to give diplomacy every chance to work. Good. We've got a good team working on it. And so if it doesn't work out, the president knows what his options are. But, you know, I'm not going to discuss what those options are with you, but the president has a lot of options at his disposal.
On Wednesday, NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte met with President Trump at the White House to discuss the war with Iran and other pressing topics.
And what the entire world learned from the bizarre meeting you're about to see is that NATO doesn't really have any good news for the President of the United States. Watch this.
About safety, this is the leader of the free world taking responsibility beyond the shores of the United States for the rest of the world. And this is what you did. I know there have been debates about whether your allies in Europe were with you enough. I just want to say one thing, which is sometimes, yeah, but let me say one thing, which is I know you think that, but let me.
Trump got.
I know about the let's say your irritation about that. But
irritation.
You look at the numbers: 4,000 to 5,000 U.S. planes taking off from bases in Europe in the 6 weeks this war took place.
Bases which we pay to maintain.
Mid-April. Bucharest, the airport in Romania, having to close. It had to close for commercial traffic because they had to make sure that you were able to send a tanker aircraft up in the air.
What about the bases in Spain?
I know there have been isolated cases about which you are really disappointed.
And the UK?
Generally speaking, your European allies have been there with you. I really want to make the point. 4,000 to 5,000 U.S. planes taking off from European air bases. So
this is a salesman trying to sell President Trump on something he's already given up on. And I don't think anybody in the room expected what happened next. Watch.
Now I want to take you, if you stay here, go ahead. I go over to these boards here.
It's a sales meeting.
What this president was able to achieve. And I start with this chart. This chart is about the Trump trillion. The Trump trillion shows you the increase Europeans and Canadians are paying into defense since you took office in 2017. Right. Trump 45 plus Trump 47. A total of extra spent by the Europeans and the Canadians of 1.2 trillion. When you look at the effect of Trump 47, so the isolated effect of the extra defense spending in 2025 and 2026, you see almost $140 billion extra spent nominal on defense by the Europeans and the Canadians. And also this year, you will again see an increase by about 120 billion, which brings it total in 2 years of over $250 billion.
So according to these charts, NATO's a worthwhile investment for the United States, even though isolated cases in the United Kingdom and in Spain and in Germany and with France, it's kind of everybody. I guess nobody really wanted to assist the United States with getting the world's energy markets moving again and preserving peace and helping the Iranian people at the exact same time. But the sales pitch continues.
I can assure you, this is because of Russia, because of the threat, but I'm also absolutely convinced that you being President of the United States, being consistently pushing for something which since Eisenhower has not been achieved, which is the Europeans equalizing their defense spending with the United States.
Because they've never wanted to do this. Because it's always been one-sided.
Look here. In total, 195,000 jobs being supported by investments. Investments from European companies into the United States, 83,000 jobs supported by that. 112,000 jobs created by the fact that Europeans are massively, about half of all their defense spending when it comes to defense industrial output is spent in the United States. 112,000 jobs. Last year, they spent $54 billion on U.S. defense industrial output. There is now an order catalog, an order backlog of $300 billion. So $300 billion of defense spending from Europeans buying this in the U.S. over the next couple of years, which is already on the order book. Last year, 54 billion, a total now order book of 300 billion, totally almost 200,000. These are real jobs.
So if this is creating all kinds of jobs, and if this is so great for Europe, and if Europe is so happy to be part of NATO and to be spending chart-topping numbers, why did it take Trump and all of his pressure to get this to happen? Why is this something that people weren't doing willingly? These are the types of questions everyone in this room is asking as this pitch continues.
People like you had yesterday when you spoke in Pennsylvania, the people behind you.
I like this
but I want to say
NATO guy.
More, if you allow. First of all,
he's
to get
persistent.
All of this done, we had to increase the defense industrial output. There is a big problem. The problem is that both in the United States and in Europe, we are not producing enough. Our stockpiles have to be replenished because of the war in Ukraine and what we do there, and for all the other reasons.
Yeah, there's a reason Europe's stockpiles have a problem. China minerals control threatens EU rearmament. These stockpiles are dependent on minerals that these guys are not able to get on their own, and therefore they cannot build the munitions they want to build. They do not have the ability to help our country like the United States has the ability to help them because of our ability to build these things, which they don't have, which begs the question, what is America paying for?
You've been so transformative vis-a-vis NATO. And I think the Secretary General just stated that. You transformed NATO, the like of which nobody would have even thought that you could have done. After all that, do you still think that European allies, like you told me, treated you badly? And if so, what can they do to make things better?
Good question.
Can you confirm that all the thousands of flights, as you stated today and yesterday on Fox News, are in compliance with NATO treaties?
Well, let me just say, he's been a friend of mine. He's a great guy, great leader, great Secretary General. Everybody respects him. And I appreciate your nice
He's
words, but
likable.
You really have done a good job. And I think if anybody else were in that position, we wouldn't even be meeting today, to be honest with you, because we were let down. We didn't need help on this at all, but it would have been nice if they would have said, we'd like to help. We didn't even need it, but it would have been nice if they said that. They didn't say it. But as Secretary General, and he's the boss of the whole operation, he was, I believe if I would have called him, and I didn't bother doing that because I was doing individual countries just to take the temperature and see how they were doing. But I think if I would have called him, he probably would have found a way to help if we needed it. I feel, would have been a little bit different. But I was disappointed. I was disappointed with Italy. I was disappointed with the UK. He's now gone.
Starmer.
And, he had a lot of problems. But we were disappointed with the UK. We were disappointed with Germany and France. We were disappointed with most of them. Spain is a horror show. Spain is terrible, even from your standpoint. I mean, they don't want to pay anything. They think they're in for a free ride. Spain is not a good group.
What countries in NATO aren't a problem? And I realize NATO is more than just England, France, Spain, Germany, but those are like the big countries. Without them, there is no NATO. They're supposed to be the leaders here. The UK is supposed to have our back. But is the president going to let NATO get a free ride, as he calls it, forever? Or is that going to change when he shows up at this meeting next week?
Not a good group at all. But I have great respect for this man. And so we're going to be discussing what took place, and we'll see what happens. Thank you. Good question.
Interesting.
Yeah,
Second question, because I don't have many disagreements with the President of the United States. Here I have slightly, because I do agree there is reason for disappointment, absolutely. But my argument is this. These are isolated cases. When you look at the overall, take for example Germany.
Isolated.
From day one, they delivered on their these are bilateral commitments, a bit of the techniques of this, but the technology, but these are bilateral commitments these countries are having with the United States. So this is not, strictly speaking, NATO. Bilateral commitments, they all did what they promised to do. And this led to between 4,000 and 5,000 US planes taking off from Europe. I would argue it would have been very difficult to do Iran without having Europe as a power projection platform for the United States.
Yeah, except for Spain.
He's right. There is also reason for disappointment.
And the UK.
Well, the big question is, are they paying the 5%? They agreed 6 months ago when we were together to pay 5%. And for the most part, they're not paying.
Well, when you look at the numbers,
they're still not
for example,
paying.
Germany, so we agreed they get a couple of years to get there because you cannot spend it in 1 year because you have an absorption problem. But Germany, for example, Germany is doubling its defense spending between.
So these are commitments that they're agreeing to today, but do not have to actually carry out that agreement for a few more years. That's the problem with all of this stuff, because you have all these agreements, countries say, yep, we'll do it, but we can't do it today. We're not ready to do it today. We got to, rearrange the deck chairs on the Titanic so we can stay afloat a little bit longer to come up with the things we're supposed to commit to an agreement that's been around for 50 plus years. Speaking of Germany, they were building what looks like the Tirpitz right here, and they canceled it. because they didn't have the money. This frigate right here that you see pictured, it had a pocket battleship displacement of, well, less than a pocket battleship, 10,000 tons. They were supposed to build 6 of them. The total financial requirement was going to be $18 billion. They spent several $billion and then shut down the program because they weren't able to meet their commitment to their own defense industry. And now they're supposed to meet commitments to other people's defense goals as part of the NATO conglomerate. See, these are the problems these countries are all having.
Is doubling its defense spending between 2021 and 2029. They will spend over 150 billion
2029.
by 2029, which is staggering, more than the French and the Brits combined even. Take the Dutch, and Poland and the Baltics already there, countries like Denmark really stepping up. So and the Nordics. So it's a bit of a mixed bag. But most of them
a mixed bag,
and the alliance is so much stronger because of this man.
That is true.
Please, yellow dress.
Thank you, Beth Turner from GB News. You mentioned that
GB News
got one foot out the door. The new guy's coming in, Andy Burnham. What do you know about him, Mr. President? And what does he need to do to improve the relationship between our two countries? The new incoming Prime Minister, Andy Burnham.
I don't know anything. I see that he was, I guess, the mayor of a town. I hear he's extremely liberal. Extremely. So that means he probably won't open up the North Sea. You know, I gave Keir Starmer some pretty good advice. I said, open up the North Sea. Go to Aberdeen, which was the hottest city in the whole continent. It was the oil city. It was the oil of Europe. And they closed everything. It was terrible. I saw it before my eyes, and I couldn't believe it. The North Sea is loaded. I have had every oil company come to see me. Sir, could you give us access to the UK? We would do anything to drill in the North Sea. And they haven't even found what's there. The amazing thing is they buy their oil from Norway, which gets the oil from the North Sea. Think of it. And they pay a big premium. Norway's got now $2 trillion in the bank.
So this comment comes up. What do you think of Britain's new incoming PM? Trump says the guy's very liberal. And then Trump mentions the thing that's holding these countries back from being able to meet their commitments under NATO, which is energy. Energy is a huge problem for the United Kingdom. Here they are buying energy from somebody else when it exists in their own backyard and they're unable to get it. And it's situations and entanglements like that with agendas that do not make financial sense and do not make countries stronger that weaken NATO and make it ineffective. It would be great for the United States to be partnering up with countries that were self-sufficient and that could provide for their own needs, their own energy needs, their own defensive needs. But this just exposes who we're actually dealing with in NATO and what future geopolitical conflict will look like given the status quo that is apparently about to continue.
And 2 weeks. Yeah, I'm a Turk myself.
Well,
and
I like him. He's a friend of mine. And
you're talking about
Turkey. Out of
Turkey.
the war. You know, he was a prime candidate to go into the war with Iran. Maybe on the Iran side, because he's not a big fan of Israel, as you know. And I asked him to stay out. He stayed out. And you know who else was great? Was President Xi of China. He could have come in. He gets half of his oil from that area. You know, I could see him wanting to, and I asked him to please stay out. And he did. We did a good job. But he stayed out. Erdogan's a great leader, very strong person, great military. And I
they
asked
buy
him to
U.S.
stay out,
stuff.
and he did, and so did President Xi, and frankly, so did Putin, if you really look. But you could say that Vladimir has some other things to focus on. But they all stayed out. I mean, it was pretty amazing.
Trump has more praise for America's competitors on a global stage than for our own allies in NATO. Notice that? That's very interesting. And it's a very sad state of affairs when our greatest ally, the United Kingdom, is showing less favorably in this discussion than countries that we really do have to worry about and keep an eye on. And it is the inaction of those countries that helped bring the situation in the Middle East to the peace deal that we're experiencing today and could actually be a good thing for the Iranian people. Countries like Russia did more for this conflict by doing nothing than our allies who actively resisted us. Think about that for a second.
And I think that Erdogan he loves Turkey, right? He's doing a great job. He loves Turkey. I love the U.S., but he loves Turkey, and he's doing a great job. He's a respected man, a respected leader, and he's been a friend of mine. Now, I shouldn't say that because guys like Peter would say, oh, he likes Erdogan. He likes Erdogan. No, Peter won't. Peter doesn't. Some of the others, let's say. But Erdogan is a strong man, but he's been everything I've ever asked him for, he's done.
Mr. President, Mr. Secretary General clearly pointed out that allies want to do defense business with you, and Turkey is definitely one of them. They want the F-110 jet engines, and they want the F-35 fighter jets. Are you going to Turkey with a big gift bag for Erdogan?
Yeah, I think so.
Oh,
he's a member of NATO. Some people don't consider himself, but he really is. He's a strong member of NATO. Yeah, I'm going to probably do something that's going to make him very happy.
Okay.
Turkey has
Tell him
a
hello,
huge,
right? Tell him hello. He's a good man.
And Turkey has a huge defense industrial base, 3,000 companies working all over the alliance, also here in the United States. So strong.
People don't know how big Turkey is in terms of the military. It's a very strong. They have a lot of our equipment. A very strong military.
Yeah.
Because of him. Yeah, please.
Your expectations are about this meeting in Ankara. What do you?
Yeah, what's going to happen?
Well, except for the fact that it was being held in Turkey by President Erdogan, I don't think I would have gone to it.
You would have come for me.
But I might go for it.
That tells you all you need to know about where Trump and the United States are with NATO right now, because he might not even be headed to this meeting next week if the Secretary General personally invited him. What do you think about all that? Where do you think about the ability of countries like Spain to stand up and defend the United States if the United States has a problem on the other side of the world? What do you think about that? And the UK and Germany. I will see you in the next video. Millions of New York apartments now have frozen rents. Look at this.
New York, the Independent Rent Guidelines Board just froze the rent. That means if you're one of the more than 2 million New Yorkers who lives in a rent-stabilized apartment, your rent's going to be frozen next year.
From the top of a balcony to down by the stage, rent-stabilized New Yorkers erupted in celebration. For the first time ever, the Rent Guidelines Board voted to freeze rents on both 1- and 2-year leases. A historic decision that means more than 1 million New Yorkers living in rent-stabilized apartments won't pay $1 more in rent for the next 2 years. All but one board member voted in favor of the measure, with Mayor Zohran Mamdani calling it a historic victory for New Yorkers.
It means everything. It means that our voices were heard, finally.
Bronx tenant Ann Maiden says she can finally breathe again.
But landlords called the whole process a sham.
A sham?
Just hours before the vote, Christina Smith, a member of the board who represented landlords, resigned from her post, accusing the panel of ignoring data because it was required to deliver a freeze. Building owners say the decision means there will be less investment in maintenance and repairs, ultimately hurting renters.
So the renters
We have to
lose.
lay off some of the supers. Only choice. It's a business. People don't get it.
I'm so proud of people my age and young people getting together and forming coalitions.
But they don't understand. This just doomed New York City's supply of apartments. There will now be less apartments for multiple reasons. And here's the biggest one.
I feel like I'm standing in a time capsule from the 70s. This is a one-bedroom apartment in the Bronx that rents for $811 a month.
Okay.
That's if the landlord were to actually put it up for rent. This is a rent-stabilized apartment, but look around. The landlord says there is so much work that has to be done here to bring it up to code that it doesn't make financial sense to rent it out.
The owner is deciding to lose less money by just keeping it vacant.
Chipped and peeling lead paint, an outdated bathroom, and that red carpet, far from luxurious.
Not exactly the red carpet people want to walk into.
Kenny Burgos is the CEO of the New York Apartment Association and advocates on behalf of landlords who own rent-stabilized apartments, like this one in Mount Eden. It's been vacant since the last tenant moved out around 2021.
And now its rent is frozen forever. So the laws in New York were already so bad. This place, which is pretty big, was being lived in by no one. And now that's definitely going to remain the case. But wait till you hear why.
Why is this apartment still vacant so many years later?
Because the law today says that when the tenant moves out, you still, of course, before law and after, you would have to upgrade and renovate this unit and bring it up to the current housing standard of 2026. The difference is now the law says we don't really care what you spend. you cannot change the rent from the previous tenants.
A 2019 change to the state's rent laws got rid of the 20% vacancy bonus, where landlords could hike rents for new tenants.
It's really a crisis.
Assemblywoman Linda Rosenthal, chair of the Housing Committee, voted for that bill.
We found that with the 20% vacancy bonus, it was an incentive for landlords to harass tenants out. Finally, we righted the scales. Landlords didn't like that, and what they said immediately after we passed it was, we're going to keep apartments off the market.
But that's reality. Reality says if your $800 apartment costs $100,000 to fix up and you can only charge $800 a month for it, you're not going to dump $100,000 into a losing investment. It's a business.
What do you say to that?
I say, what do they then say to landlords who have already gone bankrupt, who've already been in foreclosure?
Something definitely wrong here. The tug of war between landlords and tenants advocates leaves lifelong New Yorkers like Troy Williams caught in limbo.
I live in a tier 2 shelter right now, and that's why I have a voucher now, you know. And I'm really trying to, get back to where I was this time 2 years ago.
So just how many rent-stabilized apartments are sitting empty with low rents that need extensive repairs?
Question.
Well, we actually just got an answer from the city's Department of Housing Preservation and Development. A survey found just under 2,500 units that have been vacant for a year or more, needing extensive repairs with rents below $1,000. Of course, these are units sitting empty when so many are desperate for an affordable place to live.
And that's just the units they know about. When this law passed back in 2019 that capped all these rents and said no more rent increases on the stabilized apartments when somebody moves out, even if you renovate, you know what landlords started doing? If they had a stabilized apartment right here, and then next to it they had a free market apartment, when both were empty, guess what they did? They combined them and made the free market apartment much larger and jacked up the rent on the whole thing. So a lot of these apartments, when this law was passed, vanished and are never coming back. But it gets even worse because all the people celebrating, they don't understand where this is going to lead them.
It's just cosplaying fairness. This isn't real fairness.
Oh.
Jan Lee, whose family has owned this Chinatown building for nearly a century, is crying foul, accusing the Rent Guidelines Board of freezing rent, despite mounds of data he says shows rising costs for landlords.
They're not even hiding the bias anymore. The mayor had campaigned on a rent freeze. He appoints 75% of the board, and now he's got his hand on the scale.
Just hours before Thursday's meeting, drama unfolded when Christina Smith, a member of the board who represented landlords, resigned from her post, accusing the process of being broken and unjust.
Which it is.
But it did little to sway the result, as the Rent Guidelines Board voted 7-1 in an historic first to approve a 0% increase on both 1- and 2-year leases.
So here's the thing you got to understand. In order for this to work, you can freeze the rents, sure. But what about freezing the taxes that the landlord pays? What about freezing the landlord's insurance, which goes up every single year? What about freezing the landlord's utility costs, which in New York are some of the highest in the entire country? Remember, these landlords, they have to pay for hot water, cold water, and heat, and all that stuff's going up. Meanwhile, rents are frozen. It does not make sense to rent these apartments out anymore. It makes sense to instead keep them off the market forever because you're losing money renting them to people.
Renters say the measure was necessary as they struggle to combat inflation and cuts to social services.
What about the landlord's inflation?
Do so much to really affect my life in a good way.
I feel very good because in New York, that's one of the biggest problems that we have. Rent is high and we really needed it stabilized.
Mayor Mamdani, who campaigned on freezing the rent, insisted the board's decision would be fair and impartial.
Okay, well, he appointed every single person on the board, but check this out. The $800 apartment we saw, if the rent were to go up 2% instead of 0, it would have been a $16 a month increase, which means the people cheering are happy about saving $20. Like, this is not even enough money to get yourself a Big Mac meal at a McDonald's in New York City. You can't even do that. So what are people saving? There is no savings here. On a $2,000 apartment, you're saving $40 a month. Like, is that money? Yeah, it is. But that kind of money doesn't go very far in New York. Things are already so expensive, already so overpriced here. This doesn't actually help. But what it does is hurt. And maybe that's why the mayor is so excited about this.
Will ultimately hurt.
If we keep eroding one side of the equation, something's got to give, and the people in those buildings are going to suffer. So there has to be some kind of fairness and recognition of the math.
Landlords are always saying, like, it's wonderful, I know, we want to have decent rent, but at the same time, landlords like, we also have to maintain the building, and we have taxes, and we have all that other stuff. So there are two sides to this story.
Absolutely.
Building's going to collapse.
A very valid discussion that's happening in New York City, which is, can landlords absorb this rent freeze for 2 years or even longer? And there's going to have to be some compromises that are made behind the scenes on how landlords are going to maintain those costs.
Okay.
Yeah,
How do renters
compromises.
know if they live
That
in
means
a stabilized
firing
apartment? How can
people.
they-
This is no longer just a city that is a playground for the rich. This is a city for the working people who make it run, and we are making it run for us. And
But the rent's still too high for most people. And it's now it's frozen. It's going to stay that way.
Struggling to figure out how we're going to make ends meet.
Yeah.
For years, landlords have run the city, and this is like a new era of tenant power. We have a rent-free
Tenant
mayor.
power.
Hundreds of people came out
A
and
rent-free
testified,
mayor.
thousands online. Like, landlords' days are over. Tenants are in power now.
Landlords'
and
days are over.
It feels amazing.
Landlords who say they are struggling with rising costs like fuel and insurance, though, lambasting the decision.
Listen to this.
The whole process is such a farce. We're going to have to cut back. We'll have to lay off people. We'll have to lay off some of the supers. Only choice. It's a business. People don't get it. This is a business. It's not a choice that you think this is for free.
So rents just got frozen. So people who already have an $800 apartment can always have an $800 apartment instead of an $810 apartment next year. And what that means is the person who cleans the building just got fired. Because you know what? There's not enough money around to pay him anymore. Now the building stinks. Now it's going to start falling apart. What a disaster.
Freezing your rent. Mayor Mamdani made it a signature issue in his campaign, then followed through on his pledge to appoint half a dozen members of the 9-member board.
Buildings with rent-stabilized apartments saw their revenue
So he
increase by
appointed
more than
everyone on the
6%
board.
last year.
But while the outcome seemed like a foregone conclusion, it did not come without drama.
It was rigged.
This morning, Christina Smith, a board member appointed to represent landlords, abruptly resigned, claiming the mayor stacked the deck. The mayor, for his part, in a statement tonight, calling it a historic victory for tenants, adding, "This is the relief that working people across our city deserve."
Except for the working people who used to work on the buildings and now can't because they just lost their jobs. And look, as somebody that used to live in a rent-stabilized apartment in New York City, in the exact same neighborhood where the mayor of New York himself used to live, Astoria, Queens, I can tell you that having one of these apartments, it might sound good at first, but it's actually a trap. It totally messes up your ability to stay upwardly mobile in New York, because if you get into one of these places, my rent at the time was $1,800 a month. We got in, the increases were minimal. But when it came time for us to move into something else, all of the other rents had gone up astronomically outside of this stabilized place. So in order to jump to a bigger apartment, to an actual 2-bedroom, because our family was growing, we had to pay double the rent. We were not prepared for that. It was a massive shock. In fact, the rent was more than double. It was $4,500 a month for the 2-bedroom we found after paying $1,800 a month. So people get trapped in these things and they can't move. And now, yes, the rents are frozen on these apartments, but here's what that's going to do. That's going to mean that the people who have them have even less of a reason to move. And if people aren't moving out of the places where they live, new people who do not have an apartment yet cannot move in to New York City. And when you have zero turnover, the rent on the tiny number of apartments that still exist is just gonna go through the roof. It's gonna go higher and higher. New York City is already breaking records for how high the rents are here on these market rate apartments. And if people can't find a place to live because nobody's willing to move out and no one has the ability to be upwardly mobile, that is essentially a tax on people that live in New York City, a hidden tax. Because if you wanna leave, you're going to have to pay double the amount of rent. People cannot afford that. When it's time to move out or when it's time to get a bigger place, people either have to vanish or forego opportunities in life just to stay in a place that was built hundreds of years ago and is falling apart. What a nightmare. And what this basically means is the only way to stay in New York City now is to get a rent-stabilized apartment and to literally do nothing other than live there. Don't move in with other people. Don't get married. Don't have a family. Don't have a bunch of kids, because you're not going to be able to fit.
The Democrats have a problem on their hands now that, Obama and Mamdani, they're two true leaders. Neither of them can run for president in 2028.
Well, Mamdani was here, as you know, twice.
And he's a very nice guy. He's a charming guy, good-looking guy. We talk, but you can't raise taxes on people when you force them to leave your state or your city, and they're leaving and they're going to Florida. Most of them are going down to Palm Beach and Miami.
And that's the other end of this that nobody's talking about. So you've got these frozen rents. Yes, if you can get an apartment with frozen rent, you might be sitting pretty until the building you're sitting in ends up collapsing around you and you have to move out and you become homeless anyways. But the few people who end up earning enough money to move out of that apartment and pay much more for something else, if their life expands, well, they're going to get hit extra hard by all of the new taxes that are coming, which means they're going to have to move out, or they're going to have to stay and pay exorbitant amounts of money to live in a city that essentially hates them and doesn't want to see people being upwardly mobile. And this is a massive problem because this frozen rent could really hurt the job market in New York City in ways that nobody's talking about either. Because let's say that there are very few available apartments. Well, how do you expand your business in New York City? How does a company like JP Morgan bring in a whole bunch of people and build a new office and bring in a ton of jobs? You can't do that because there aren't places for people to live. And every single time buildings get built in New York right now, because rents are so expensive, most of the places that get built, what are they? They're one bedrooms, they're studio apartments. You might find a couple of two bedrooms. It was very hard for us to find the 3-bedroom apartment that we just moved out of because there are so few of these. And nobody wants to admit that what that means is if you have only studios and 1-bedroom apartments, and those are the entry-level apartments that are on the market that people can move into for $3,000, $4,000 a month, it's either that or it's a bedroom somewhere where you have a roommate. What that means is the only people that can come into New York and even get established or start doing that are people who have no other entanglements. These are going to be single people, people who most likely just graduated college, people who are starting out in the workforce potentially. That means that if you start your company in New York or you want to expand your business in New York, you can really only expand entry-level positions. It's going to be a lot harder to bring in people who have talent and are already successful because perhaps those people have more entanglements in life. Perhaps they have a bunch of kids. Perhaps they have a big family. Perhaps they want to have more than just a shoebox somewhere, and shoeboxes are all that's available. It's going to be hard to attract top talent. Entry-level talent, yes, but top talent, no. And that's going to mean that companies that really want to do something and really want to accomplish something and want to pay people lots of money to come here, well, they're not going to be able to do that in New York because there's going to be nowhere for those people to live. It's not like we're going to have a whole bunch of rent-stabilized apartments popping up. Now, if anything, we're going to have even fewer of them, and nobody wants to admit that what this just did was basically give 2 million people a handout at the expense of everybody else who lives in this city. How is this any different than vote buying? If you're the mayor and you tell 2 million people that they're not going to get a rent increase if they elect you, why would they vote for somebody who doesn't tell them that? The only way that somebody in the mayoral election that brought the city, Mayor Mamdani, could have won would be to out Mamdani. Mamdani wants to freeze your rent. It's already too high. If you elect me, I won't freeze it. I'll bring it down. I'll pay you to live in this city, which is the only fair way to do this because this city's been stealing from you. These landlords are stealing from you, freezing the rent. That just means they're going to keep doing it. I'm going to bring it down. Only problem is that attitude would have got somebody elected who might be even worse. This is crazy. New York's housing situation is just going to get worse after this rent freeze. And here's what's going to happen. You're going to have people that have frozen rent, and for a few years before the building they're living in collapses, they're going to say, you know what, this is great. Mayor Mamdani froze my rent, saved me all kinds of money. But then you're going to have people that don't live in a rent-stabilized apartment. These are going to be people that live in a free market apartment, and they're going to say, hey, what about us? Hey, Mr. Mayor Mamdani, what about us? We want a rent freeze too. And then the skids will be greased for the city council to introduce citywide rent control, freezing the rent for all apartments in New York City. You see, that's what's next on the table here. Citywide frozen rent. 0 rent increases for anyone. And then wait till you see what a disaster we got on our hands here. Thank you for watching. See you in the next video.
Democrat insiders are now worried the Justice Department probing California Governor Gavin Newsom's inner circle, including his wife's taxes and her nonprofits, that is going to hurt his run for the White House.
Well, an investigation should hurt your chances of becoming president if you're unfit to be president, right? At least that's what people like Governor Newsom and his wife tell us about President Trump. But you see, this isn't just about the governor or his family and their alleged scams, because although they might be the ones under investigation, there is an entire fraud complex behind them that does not want to be exposed.
I don't know how this is legal, but he essentially gives these NGOs millions of dollars and then they donate back to his campaign. And it is so dirty and so corrupt, but somehow legal.
Donald Trump isn't just coming after me because of my mean tweets. He's coming after me because I'm considering running for president.
He's trying to blame it all on Donald Trump, which is basically the only thing that we've heard from him so far. He's saying that the DOJ is weaponized against him because Donald Trump is somehow nervous he's going to run for president.
And so when I had a look at Jennifer Newsom's charity, I found that she was paying herself since 2012 $3.7 million. This is a lot of money when you look at the amount that the charity brings in.
I think that this is very serious for Gavin Newsom, because you look at polling, for example, the last 4 that I've seen, it's Gavin Newsom trailing Kamala Harris, who isn't exactly, the Caitlin Clark of presidential candidates, by 22 points, 19 points, 17 points, 18 points.
So look at this. Governor Newsom has been suspiciously directing money to his connected nonprofits. What a shocker. And the reason I say this is because the stuff going on in California right now, these are the things people point the finger at President Trump and they say, this is what he's doing. He's the one that's corrupt, but really it's them. They're the ones doing this. At least those are the allegations. But should we be surprised that in America's largest sanctuary state, which is full of fraud, every fraud from immigration fraud to medical fraud to the defrauding of the needy to feed the homeless industrial complex, that elected officials wouldn't be looking at all of this plundering and not be tempted? Well, it appears they have looked. They have been tempted, and they've gotten in on the plundering. And how does this happen? Well, apparently it's pretty easy to orchestrate if you're the governor and your wife runs nonprofits. With the governor allegedly ordering companies to donate money to groups he was connected with or were directly run by his wife. Then those same companies would be given lucrative no-bid contracts by the California government after making such donations. And since they're making money in California, they could then use some of it to support political candidates of their choosing. And guess who those turn out to be? But that brings us to the real reason the federal government has to investigate this. Can you imagine if Trump's kids had a nonprofit and Trump told Lockheed Martin, hey, donate to my kids' nonprofit. And after they do, Trump says, by the way, here's a government contract that's about the same amount of money that you donated to my kids. That would be a national scandal. And that's what's happening in California because the Newsom machine has allegedly solicited $350 million worth of these donations, some of which were made to his wife's nonprofits, and all of this is public record. We can see what it is. And the reason that that's fascinating is because it makes the moment you're about to see, which was caught on camera, totally bizarre. Watch this.
Governor, Madam First Lady, it's great to see you both. We're live on MS Now. You've been very, very forceful in your condemnation of this DOJ investigation. And to both of you, I would love for you guys to both address this and what's happening.
All on contrast today. I mean, got up there, literally started tearing up. And I think everybody feels that spirit and that pride that we've been missing. And we didn't even realize how much we've been missing it. We have people that, frankly, are unworthy of their positions.
So Gavin Newsom is asked point blank about being investigated. And the best answer he has is that the people investigating are criminals themselves. That's not a very good answer. He doesn't have an answer. He never expected to be asked about what he was up to because this is just how stuff works in California. And we know that because of what his wife said next. Watch.
Investigation. What do you want to say?
I'm just so grateful for this inspiration and leadership. We need more of this.
Hey, this is stuff that happens in other countries.
Yeah, he's right. This is stuff that happens in other countries. And that's why it's being investigated because this stuff is happening in California. But if this is their answer, it proves that the Newsoms never thought for a second anyone was ever going to call him out on this. Remember, Kamala and Tim were supposed to be running America. They were going to let all the fraud keep going. No one was ever going to ask. No one was ever going to check. And if they checked, it wasn't going to matter because it was going to be institutionalized all across our country. But here's what Gavin Newsom has to say about these investigations when he has a moment to compose himself and look straight into the camera in a social media video. Watch.
Donald Trump isn't just coming after me because of my mean tweets. He's coming after me because I'm considering running for president, because he hates that I've consistently called him out over and over again for his lies and deceit.
So that might look like it was an official proclamation by the governor. And while he is the governor and he was on an official looking set, that was actually posted to his personal social media to defend himself. And he says Trump's out there and he's looking for a crime and he's not going to stop looking until he can make one up or discover one that's not really a big deal. But this makes it sound like Trump is the first president to investigate Gavin Newsom. Is that true?
Gavin Newsom wants you to think that Trump is weaponizing the DOJ against him because he's running for president. Get real. The probes into Newsom, his wife, his ex-chief of staff started under Biden and stemmed from Democratic whistleblowers. He's using Trump to cover his own crimes.
Okay, so President Biden is the one that started these investigations? I thought all of this was Trump's fault. I thought Trump was the big meanie here. Could it be that Gavin's fraud was so out of line that even President Biden, whose successor was going to be Kamala and Tim, if that group says that your fraud is so bad, they have to investigate you, you know something's out of whack. Old Joe was looking around one day and he said, you know what? This guy, Gavin, he's not that good at hiding the fraud. He's not as good as Timmy. So we're going to go with Timmy. He's going to be the VP. And then we're going to investigate Gavin because somebody's got to make Tim look legitimate. And that's how we can do that. We can investigate Gavin because he's even worse. And as you're about to see, the more you look into this, the worse it gets for the Newsoms.
I don't know how this is legal, but he essentially gives these NGOs millions of dollars and then they donate back to his campaign. And it is so dirty and so corrupt, but somehow legal.
That's pretty wild. But she makes a good point. This is all legal in California. Laws have been passed to make things that are illegal elsewhere legal right here. But what we're talking about here are these $340 million in quote unquote behest payments, which is where the politician can solicit donations on behalf of third parties, even if that third party's his wife who he files a joint tax return with. Apparently, Blue Shield gave $20 million and then was rewarded with a contract of a similar amount of money. Isn't that interesting? Kaiser gave $9 million and then got a similar contract. Huh, funny. But here's where it really gets weird. Records list roughly $4.8 million for the California Partners Project, which includes $2.3 million from the Federated Indians of Graton Rancheria. The tribe gave $500,000 in April 2024, months before Newsom's office urged federal officials to reject a rival casino project, and another $500,000 a year later, about a month before California sued to block the project. It sounds like there's a casino going on here, and it's actually happening in the governor's mansion, underneath his watchful eyes.
A story claiming that Governor Newsom's wife and her firm pocketed more than $3 million from a gender stereotypes charity. For more on this, we're joined by the Daily Mail's chief investigative reporter, Josh Boswell. Josh, great to see you. So what made you look into Newsom's wife in the first place, and what did you find?
Well, there are just always a lot of questions that seem to be swirling around the Newsoms and their finances, have been for years. And so I thought, this is a man who clearly is going to be running for president. This is worth looking at, what their finances are, what the shape of them are. And so when I had a look at Jennifer Newsom's charity, I found that she was paying herself since 2012 $3.7 million. This is a lot of money when you look at the amount that the charity brings in. It's sort of $1 to $1.7 million a year. And she's paying up to a third of that to herself and her own company, $300,000 a year. Now, that is, I did a bit of data analysis looking at what charities that size usually pay their executives, and she was in the top 5% of all charities in the nation for pay.
Wow. So she receives more money from her charity than other charities pay their executives, which means that her charity is less charitable than the competition. So if you're going to direct money over here, it ain't doing as good as it could do if it went over here to another charity that's not paying its executives too much. She's in the top 5% of charities in the entire nation, apparently, but her charity is not. That's interesting. And that's what's so shocking to me about them getting caught on camera, ambushed, if you want to call it that, asked about this thing that they've been doing out in the open forever. And no one who premeditates something like this and thinks it's a problem goes out on the street without an answer. They didn't think any of this would ever be seen as illegitimate, and now it is.
So DOJ, of course, doesn't comment on the specifics of this. We've really only heard from Gavin Newsom claiming this investigation is targeting them, even though, as we mentioned, it started in 2022 in his orbit. Do you think that the charity is the reason DOJ might be investigating her?
Let's find out.
There's a whole bunch of reasons, potentially. There are a lot of questions around their finances. So the charity could be one of them. Now, it is legal for a charity to pay whatever they want to their executives. But one of the issues they might be looking at is, who are the donors to the charity that are financing that pay? What kind of relationships do they have with the California government that Newsom is in charge of?
That's a great question.
There's also, if you look at his income, and he's released at least, partly to journalists in closed-door viewing sessions, his tax returns. And if you look at that, his income, it's about 1.2 to 1.4 million a year. And it just doesn't add up for all of his...
Isn't that fascinating? Gavin Newsom is one of the people that, Trump's a criminal, Trump's hiding something. Remember that whole debacle? Trump hasn't released tax returns. How dare he? Well, here's the same thing. His tax returns aren't coming out either, and there's a very good reason for that.
Expenses. He's got massive mortgages, $625,000 in mortgage payments.
Wow.
He's got at least $1 million in living expenses, and the two just don't add up.
That's crazy.
I would be interested in that if I were an IRS investigator. One other thing to look at
where's
here
the money
is
coming from?
The way that his property transactions are structured lead to a lot of questions. When he bought his $3.7 million Sacramento estate, it was done through an LLC, but that LLC doesn't seem to have appeared on his tax returns. There's all kind of questions of why he would do it that way, and he hasn't answered those satisfactorily.
Yeah, why would you use a fake company that doesn't exist to buy your house and then not disclose that company on your own tax returns? That's weird. It's almost as if you're trying to hide who owns the house, or you're playing some sort of game, or you're trying to disguise where the money was funneled into for that $3.8 million estate, which is a lot of money. If you're the governor of California, you're making $250,000 a year, and then you got your wife running a bunch of charities making around $300,000 a year. So the Newsom's annual income should be less than what their mortgages are. How are they living the life of elites in Silicon Valley without the income to do that? Unless they have the income to do that, it just doesn't come from anything that has a paper trail, at least a paper trail that's out in the open.
And that's California Governor Gavin Newsom blaming politics for the DOJ investigation into his and his wife's finances. This is days before the investigation became public. Newsom was fined over $31,000 for a late reporting of more than $5.5 million in charitable donations. Joining me now is California Post opinion editor Joel Pollack.
Hey,
Joel, great to see you.
Post.
Thank you so much for being here. What's your take on this investigation?
Well, first of all, it wasn't just charitable donations. He was fined for failing to report what are called behested payments. These are payments that are allowed in California, where politicians ask donors to give money to charities of their choice. And in Newsom's case, the charity he was asking donors to give to was run by his wife. So that creates conflicts of interest, as does the fact that some of the donors had interests before the state.
Wow.
And the implication is that if you gave a little money to the governor's wife's charity, maybe the governor would be a little bit more inclined to favor your position as opposed to somebody else's. So that is already in the public domain. We don't know what else the DOJ is digging up. There are reports that they're looking into Jennifer Siebel Newsom's tax returns. But I can say this. We don't know whether these investigations are politically motivated or not. It didn't help John Bolton when he said that the investigation into his misuse of classified information was politically motivated. He just recently pleaded guilty.
Ooh. So there could really be a crime here. It really looks like the Newsoms have a pay-to-play operation that, hey, if you want to get ahead in California, you want to do business the right way, you better be doing business with the casino the governor's running at his $3.8 million estate. That better be your game plan, because if it's not, you're going to get passed over for a casino of your own. You're going to get passed over for that lucrative contract that can pay your bills and keep your company going. No wonder California is so poorly run. The fraud taking place on the streets has made its way all the way up to the top. Everyone is in on it. If you're not in on the fraud in California, you're not going to be running anything for very long. And now these people want to run the entire country. Think about that.
That doesn't actually explain whether Newsom is guilty or not.
True.
And if Newsom were being honest with the voters of California, he would come clean about what these behested payments are, instead of waiting until beyond the deadline to account for them.
Yeah, why is he hiding it?
Wow. Meanwhile, prediction markets show positive movement for Newsom's presidential ambitions.
Because he's under attack from Trump.
Well, I don't really pay a lot of attention to prediction markets. If prediction markets were correct, Eric Swalwell would be the leading candidate for governor today. He had over 2/3% likelihood. You know, prediction markets.
Those people lost their money.
Some value, mostly the same as anecdotal value. We believe in them because we think insiders are making money often inappropriately by trading on information that they only have access to. But often prediction markets are just getting the same garbage in, garbage out that the rest of us are getting from the media. And so I don't really place too much stock in them. But I will say that Newsom is leading a race to the bottom. Democrats seem to believe that the most important thing about 2028 is being the most anti-Trump candidate they possibly can be, even though Trump will not be on the ballot.
That's their whole platform at this point. The entire platform of this party is who can stand up to Trump the most. And that's what's fascinating. If you watch the social media video that Gavin Newsom made dressed up as the governor, the whole thing is a campaign video for why he should be your next president, because he's the one standing up to Trump for you. I don't know why you'd want to stand up to a president who's lowering gas prices and protecting the future of our country and the entire world from dangerous regimes for generations. I don't know why you'd want to stop that. But apparently Gavin Newsom thinks there's enough people in America who want to stop that if he can get them on his side, if they're not out there rioting, throwing themselves against the federal government at a jail somewhere, that he can win. So to him, these investigations are a fundraising opportunity. He's actually been doing quite a lot of fundraising off these investigations to boost himself up in the eyes of the voters. But those are going to have to be voters who want what Gavin Newsom wants, which has led us to where California is today, an absolute train wreck disaster.
And if Democrats thought that doing a good job was the criterion for being the presidential nominee, you would see Newsom clearing brush in California. You would see him actually balancing the state budget instead of dipping $20 billion into the reserves.
Wow.
You'd see him cleaning up crime. You'd see him helping rebuild in Pacific Palisades. You don't see him doing that. And he actually has no track record of accomplishments in California to talk about. He's got high-speed rail that doesn't go anywhere. He's got reservoirs that were planned and never built. He's got Delta tunnels that were reduced from 2 to 1 and then never built. He basically has a resume of zero, and so he has to...
Actually, he does have a resume of accomplishments, but they're all fraudulent accomplishments, and that doesn't matter to the average American who wants lower gas prices and cheaper food and wants to see homes built that they can afford to live in at some point. No, it doesn't help that person. But what it does do is it does create a huge resume of accomplishments for the industrial fraud complex in this country. Who do you think their candidate's going to be? Is it going to be somebody that wants to crack down on fraud? You think they're going to elect Nick Shirley as president, the fraud complex? Absolutely not.
But luckily for him, that's what Democrats have an appetite for right now.
Yep.
Wow,
That's what they have an
amazing.
appetite for.
And Joel, I spoke with California Congressman Ro Khanna here last week, and he admitted basically what he's looking for after I questioned him on his own White House aspirations. Watch this. Look, bottom line here, you've been testing the waters openly. You've been coming on a lot, talking about all these other issues beyond just your own portfolio. Do you want to break some news? Are you running in 28?
Look, I believe that the central issue is the economic divide in this country. And I have a vision of economic patriotism. I want that platform out there. Look, I was speaking to the Teamsters. I'll just take this 20 seconds on this point. And I was going through my whole economic plan. And then I said, I know a lot of people out here have voted for Trump. And you know what? we've got to stop insulting each other. We've got to start working together. We've got to start to figure out a united purpose in this country.
I think you answered my question.
He's moderating.
Well,
I think you answered my question. The answer is yes.
I love coming on here because
Congressman, you're running on Trump's agenda. You're running on Trump's agenda. He's building up America. He's getting the supply chains to America. You're running on Trump's agenda. That's it. We got it.
Trump identified a lot of the problems.
Why else is he on Fox News if he's not running on Trump's agenda? Who's he trying to get votes from? That would be you and me and reasonable people that might not want to vote for the mess going on in California. And that's where all these people are from. They think their list of accomplishments in California is going to get them the two things that almost got Tim and Kamala into the White House. I say almost, they lost in a landslide, but these are the two things they want. The first thing they want is the backing of the industrial fraud apparatus in America, because all the scammers of this country are going to do everything they can to funnel money into whoever their candidate is. And then they think if they moderate their positions at the very last minute like this, that they can get the fraud money and your votes, which is what they're going to need to win. Kamala and Tim, they might have got the fraud money. They might have got the fraudsters on their side, but they didn't get any of the votes, so it didn't work out. What do you think about that? See you in the next video. Iran broke the ceasefire and Trump responded. Check this out.
As far as we're concerned, we're holding up our end of the ceasefire. As you mentioned, Brian, there were attacks on commercial vessels that the United States of America, directed by the president, responded to, and that will continue to happen, but we hope we don't see that.
Her remarks come after 2 days of exchanges of fire between the United States and Iran over the weekend. It all started late last week when Iran targeted vessels in the Strait of Hormuz with one-way attack drones. The U.S. responded with strikes in southwestern Iran. Well, when the Iranians attacked yet another oil tanker, the U.S. ramped up those strikes, going after Iranian military surveillance infrastructure, communication systems, air defense sites, drone storage facilities, and mine-laying capabilities. In response, Iran launched missiles and drones toward Kuwait and Bahrain early Sunday. The goal for the Trump administration in the short term remains keeping the Strait of Hormuz open and safe. But this week, those more detailed discussions on Iran's nuclear program will proceed.
President Trump writing on Truth Social about an hour ago, quote, Iran has requested a meeting. It will take place tomorrow in Doha.
Okay, so they have requested talks after tensions flared up. But the question is, why did that happen? And here's what no one's talking about. Apparently, the U.S. has been turning up the heat, so to speak. And one of the things that made Iranian negotiators angry was that U.S. Central Command, this is our Navy that's over there, was working with the International Maritime Organization to escort ships through the Omani side of the Strait of Hormuz, where there's no toll, away from Iran, and where they may be able to threaten commercial shipping in a dangerous manner. The action undermined Tehran's control over the vital shipping route, which faced a big challenge after Oman said it did not support a toll system. What is this control that Iran says they have? They don't have any. Ships are getting out safely, and that makes them angry, but there's more. Iran has not been able to find buyers for its oil even after the U.S. lifted sanctions. So there's a shortage of oil, and nobody wants to buy it, even from Iran. Why is that? Officials from the National Iranian Oil Co. have gone around Asia to offer refiners discounted oil to expedite sales. Their hope was that the blockade that the U.S. had was going to end and they were going to be able to sell their oil, but people don't want to buy it from them. That's a big problem. That's the one thing they feared losing, and now it's gone.
The president's patience isn't going to last forever. Discussions are ongoing, particularly at a technical level of how to get inspectors in, the down blending, and the other pieces that are focused on ensuring Iran never has a nuclear weapon.
Right.
But they need to understand their leverage is diminishing by the day.
There is no leverage, allegedly.
And Bill, certainly there are disagreements inside of Iran about a path forward because the United States is applying both diplomatic and military pressure against the regime.
Here's what you also have to understand. There are people in Iran who want to start making money again. These are the people at the top. These are the people that have now taken over Iran's government. But if you look at a map here of the Strait of Hormuz, you can see that all it takes is one group of bad actors in Iran's territory that decide to do something, and their military is so fractured, one rogue group can launch something that makes national news. And I think there are elements of the regime, holdouts, if you will, that are enjoying that they can do something, and it immediately makes its way to CNN.
What matters is that whatever action the enemy takes, we have responded and will continue to respond. We have repeatedly said that if the enemy once again breaks its commitments or violates the ceasefire, our response will be stronger than before. We stress once again that it will be stronger.
Yep, so they're accusing everyone else of violating
over
the
whether the
ceasefire.
U.S. and Iran can reach a lasting peace deal. The president's saying it is very possible that they will never learn. There may come a point when we are no longer able to be reasonable and will be forced to military complete the job that we very successfully started. Bahrain, meantime, says the Iranian strikes damaged a residential building near the airport, but no one was killed.
Well, thank God. So their attacks are inconsequential. And Trump's statement here, this is very important because people say, oh, President Trump doesn't know who he's dealing with. Well, look, the path to peace has been put on the table. They can take it and things can work out. But you have to understand that the president knows full well they very well may not take it. It may be impossible for them to take because their military is so fractured and nobody's really in control. So the U.S. is prepared for both possibilities. Look at this.
If we don't make the final deal, their nuclear program is still destroyed. They're still much weaker as a country. So my attitude is America wins either way. But I do think that what the president has done is asked us to do something that, frankly, nobody in 47 years of dealing with the Iranians has done, which is offer them an opportunity to fundamentally transform how they behave with the West.
Right.
He's saying, look, if they're willing to change, we're willing to change too. If they're not willing to change, we still fundamentally have all the cards. And I think it's a good place for us to be.
But their program isn't destroyed. The nuclear program isn't destroyed. I mean, I don't know any of our objectives. And look, I said
what part is not destroyed?
Well, we didn't get in there. The whole thing was we have to get in there and see.
See, this is what people are going to say. They're going to say that even though their reactors are gone and the nuclear sites are inaccessible and everything is buried deep underneath the ground and the only country that can go in there and get it out of there is the United States or potentially Russia, that Trump has failed and that the objectives have not been met and that we haven't won and they're stronger than they've ever been before. And this is what we're going to keep hearing because as Trump has even said himself many times, they could let us in. They could give us all the material. They could do every single thing in the deal and people would say, oh, we've still lost. They could even say Trump won and people would say, oh, no, he's actually lost.
Otherwise, we wouldn't be doing this.
Well, let me say,
no, we didn't.
First of all, so a nuclear program, and I'm hardly a nuclear scientist, I'm a lowly politician, but the thing that you have to destroy is their ability to enrich uranium, which has been destroyed.
The centrifuges.
How do we
destroy
know
their
that?
ability. Well, because you need functioning centrifuges that can actually spin.
All the time, we got to get in there and we got to get the dust.
It's not good enough.
Okay, and we didn't get in there,
It's
so
not
how
good
do we
enough.
get the dust?
So that's actually a separate question. So there's the highly enriched stockpile, which, by the way, was allowed to accumulate over 20 years of previous administrations. That enriched stockpile is something that we want to get. But, Bill, if we never get it, and the president wants it, and we are going to get it, but if we never got it, it's buried deep underground, and they don't have the ability to turn it into a nuclear weapon. So the program is functionally destroyed. We're just talking about, can we set them back even further through these negotiations?
And here's the thing that nobody wants to admit. There are elements in America that want to say you failed. There is a train of thinking that says Iran has won this thing no matter what happens. Even if their military and all of their ability to be an aggressor in this region has been set back 30, 40 years. Even though that's the case, even though they have no more nuclear program, there's people that say, oh, you haven't destroyed it. You just heard it right there. What do you mean we haven't destroyed it?
U.S. officials say Iran had a chance to stop shooting, and they did not take it. Instead, they attacked another ship Saturday morning, a Panama flag tanker traveling through the Strait of Hormuz. As a result, CENTCOM says U.S. military aircraft targeted Iranian military surveillance infrastructure, communication systems, air defense sites, drone storage facilities, and mine layer capabilities. Commercial vessel transits through the Strait of Hormuz continue. U.S. forces remain vigilant and ready. A senior U.S. official tells our Jennifer Griffin the strikes were larger than the ones the U.S. forces carried out on Friday, but they had to hit areas where Iran has regrouped some military assets.
Rebuilding.
An official tells Jennifer, in the time since the ceasefire on April 7th, Iran has reconstituted thus the targets around the Strait of Hormuz. There's a lot that is damaged, a lot, but they moved things around.
So they moved military assets over by the Strait of Hormuz just so they could launch these types of attacks. And again, we're talking about rogue elements of this regime that do not want to see peace, that are totally against the idea of middle ground and rejoining the rest of the world, which will better the lives of the very people of this country, who are the ones caught in the middle of all this.
Is simply reminding them that there's two paths. Right. And President Trump and Vice President Vance on this couch with us laid it out, saying there's two. We win either way. We can do it whichever way you want to do it.
Decision.
But we are going to go one path or the other, decided by you and the choices you make.
Those are military decisions, but there's also the politics. 67% of Americans like the peace deal.
Yeah.
And so that's a challenge politically for the president. People want this war to be over. They want their gas prices done. And also there's a lot of candidates that are running for office right now on the Republican side who would like this to end so gas prices can drop and they can start talking about American issues ahead of the midterm. So there's a military question here, but there's also you can never take the politics out of it.
So everyone wants peace. There's nobody that wants to see continued war here. And now the choice is up to Iran. What do they want to happen? And the most interesting thing about this is the bet Trump made against the regime before this whole thing started. Now, critics are saying that this bet's not going to work. They're saying this peace deal is all carrot and no stick, which is what it says right here. But the gamble is that Iran wants money more than it wants power. And that's exactly what we're seeing from this regime. Talks are going on, and the carrot is the money. And we've just seen what happens if the ceasefire gets broken. We saw that over the weekend. Nobody wants that to keep happening. And Iran's lead negotiators, they don't want this to keep happening. They want their military to chill out so that they could get this deal done so that the money can start coming back in. Right now, they're going all over the place. They're trying to sell their oil. They're trying to get economic activity happening once again in their country. They want money. They want activity. They don't want to have a country that has totally failed. At least the group of leaders that are in charge now don't seem to want that, or else we wouldn't even be here. The only thing they can get out of this is money. They cannot get nuclear weapons. They cannot get long-range missiles. They cannot continue threatening the rest of the world. So the three things that everybody says Iran's never going to give up, they are giving up every single time they come back to the negotiating table.
Hostilities appear to be halting in the Middle East. President Trump saying that negotiations with Iran will resume tomorrow in Doha, Qatar. This comes after both countries traded intense strikes over the weekend. Possible. Starting at the end of last week. Alex Hogan has more. North Lawn, the White House. What are you hearing, Alex? Good morning.
Hi, Bill. So a U.S. official tells me that Iran and the U.S. will stand down on attacks. Vessels in the Strait of Hormuz can move freely, and technical talks on the Memorandum of Understanding will continue. President Trump this morning announced that there will be a meeting in Doha tomorrow, saying that Iran has requested it, but Iranian officials today deny that any meetings are scheduled
yet.
They
always do that. They say, oh, no.
Special Envoy Witkoff and Jared Kushner will be flying to Doha for high-level meetings this week as we continue to discuss the Memorandum of Understanding. On the sidelines of those high-level talks will be the technical talks.
So what we're witnessing here is every time Iran says they're going to do something and then somebody else in the regime comes out and denies it, we're witnessing the civil war and the power struggle that are going on in this country at the exact same time. And you have to remember, we wouldn't be where we are today with a peace deal on the table and with talks that are actually productive. If the side that wanted their country to have an economy and integrate with the rest of the world hadn't been the ones in charge at all, if the people who want this campaign to go on forever and have vowed that they're just going to stick it out and want to be aggressors forever, if those guys were in charge, there wouldn't be any talks.
We've heard Iranian officials in the last couple days argue that Tehran still controls the strait. UN Ambassador Mike Waltz pushing back on those comments and the idea of Iranian tolls in the waterway.
Trump's not going to stand for it. And meanwhile, we continue to move ships out by the dozens every day, and world oil prices are not just stable, they're dropping.
So
That's right. And there's enough oil that Iran, when they try to sell their regime oil, aren't getting the buyers they thought they were going to get. They are not bringing in the hundreds of millions they thought they were going to immediately start getting once they agreed, other countries are looking at this and they're like, yeah, we can still get oil. You know, it's a little more money than we might want it to be, but we're not all willing to buy this regime oil, which is bad news for them. That's the one thing they were hoping. And you've got to understand, they thought that the second the U.S. blockade evaporated, it was going to be like this whole conflict had never happened and they were going to be back. But no. And that shows that there is willingness on the part of the rest of the world not to support them if they're just going to use the money they get from that to threaten the safety of others. That's a good thing.
Are seeing those prices continue to drop. AAA says that the daily national average is now at $3.86.
Yeah.
Meantime, we're also hearing now from the White House telling Fox that Secretary of State Marco Rubio and Witkoff will have a briefing to tell the full House and Senate about the latest on this peace plan. Again, that taking place later this afternoon.
Iran's strikes may reflect an Iranian effort to dissuade the Gulf states from resisting Iranian control over the strait. I think that seems pretty true, right? That's the leverage they have?
Well, we have to remember we came into 2026 on a win with Venezuela. We had a couple other small special operations focused wins leading up to that. We had last summer where we were told that the nuclear ambitions and facilities in Iran were destroyed, really probably degraded, though. Language is important. Precision in language reflects precision in thought. So now we move into this where we think we have about a 30-day window here where we can force Iran to the negotiating table and to achieve the goals that we want, which is no more nuclear weapons, no more ballistic missile capability as we move into these new negotiations. So from the viewer perspective, it seems like we're seeing the same things that we saw last month. And the question is, will we see these same things in July? Will we see these same things?
Yeah, how do you break the cycle?
Exactly. How do you break that cycle when Iran is very good at doing what they do with stalling and
Jack,
delaying?
do you think we can get to that point?
So where does this leave us? It means that as these peace talks continue, two things are going to likely continue happening. Every time there is some sort of breakthrough, the elements of this regime that do not agree with that breakthrough, which takes them away from being a regime and towards reintegrating with the world economy, are going to be contested by whoever has lost power. Those stories are going to be picked up, broadcast all over the internet as though Trump has failed and as though we are getting nowhere and as though these guys are somehow more powerful than they've ever been, even though their military is not in the standing it was before this whole thing started. And the second thing that hopefully we don't see anymore will likely be sporadic military action by rogue elements of this regime, because the regime is fractured. You have people all over the place. You have no central command. Everybody's got different belief systems, and it only takes one joker to do something that makes it onto CNN and goes viral and makes it look like this whole thing has just restarted itself. But that's the reason that this entire ceasefire, which Iran has broken multiple times, Trump did not bring the United States back to what many are calling full military action, right? That never happened. And people were saying, oh, why is Trump doing this? Why is Trump just letting Iran beat him and be such a aggressor? Because the people negotiating don't have control over those areas of their military. The whole thing is fractured, and the way you move something forward is with patience, not necessarily constant force. What do you think about that? I'll see you in the next video.
Now to a major takedown involving 5 different criminal operations in the South Bronx. More than 30 people busted for the roles in crime rings that for years have terrorized the community.
So, criminal cartels have taken over areas of Brooklyn and the Bronx where they've been wreaking havoc for years, which should come as a surprise to absolutely no one, especially New York's socialist mayor, who, while these criminals are getting arrested, is busy bragging about his plans to keep this place a sanctuary forever. But critics say if that happens, things in New York could get even worse.
And how bad has it been?
This area used to be really tough.
Residents, shoppers, businesses, passerbys had to endure at all hours of the day.
I'm the mayor of a city of 8.5 million people. More than 3 million are immigrants, and I'm one of them.
And yet what we've seen this federal administration's policies do is wreak havoc across our city. And it's not just on those who do not have documentation. Frankly, it breeds a sense of fear amongst so many who call the city home, where they don't know if they're going to step out of their home and be profiled.
Well, it is being called one of the largest gang busts in the history of Brooklyn.
They're singing and rapping and celebrating. 4 guys in the car, all armed.
BG baby locked up. Somebody got to do this again.
They also voted to defund our law enforcement. So what you're really going to get here, true blue socialists, people who really do want to see our country looking more like Venezuela.
We have to use every tool in the toolbox to make sure that we abolish ICE and keep our immigrant neighbors safe.
So the socialists now have a firm grasp on the capital of capitalism, New York City, and that's going to be a problem. Because what nobody's talking about is the more the party of higher taxes and open borders wins, the more New York City itself is going to lose. And these socialists have come into office as champions of affordability and the little guy. But the reality is the nightmare they're creating is the least affordable anywhere in America, with $5,000 rents that essentially evict the little guy before he can even think about entering the middle class, all while our leaders continue bragging that this city is a sanctuary first and foremost, which exists in absolute rebellion to the federal government and its laws, which they despise. But here's the problem with that. There is no sanctuary city anywhere in America that is a sanctuary city, yes, but has an ironclad justice system that prosecutes violent offenders, refuses to release them, and has overall safe streets. That does not exist anywhere. The sanctuary city is always icing on top of the cake of decriminalization, which essentially lets slide a whole bunch of other types of crimes that do absolutely nothing but make the streets more dangerous. We're talking about no more prosecutions or jailing for things like assaults, robberies, retail thefts. And when you add to that laws like New York's bail reform, which allows repeat offenders to pass through a revolving door jail and get back out on the streets minutes after their 100th arrest, you end up with a public safety disaster. And when the social justice benefits imagined by these policies fail to materialize, there's only one step remaining. Which brings us to the real reason the border czar keeps talking about a surge of ICE agents that is on the way to New York City. Once your city becomes a sanctuary that wants to hide people who've broken America's laws from the federal government while sometimes paying them to stay in your city, it may have passed the point of no return. And there's only one way to bring it back or take it back from criminal elements that should not exist on the streets and should not be emboldened by policies and laws that protect their behavior at the expense of the law-abiding, who are not made safer by a system that looks around every single day to find laws it doesn't like and then either decriminalize them or just stand in opposition to them, because the criminals who break these laws are viewed as victims of somebody like Donald Trump. But as ridiculous as all this sounds, Mayor Mamdani is out there taking a victory lap after his DSA, Democratic Socialists of America candidates, swept the local primaries and are now going to help run the federal government of America. And do you think he's moderating his positions now?
No, I'm the mayor of a city of 8.5 million people. More than 3 million are immigrants, and I'm one of them. And yet what we've seen this federal administration's policies do is wreak havoc across our city. And it's not just on those who do not have documentation. Frankly, it breeds a sense of fear amongst so many who call the city home, where they don't know if they're going to step out of their home and be profiled.
So if you listen to the mayor of New York, every single immigrant here, whether they're here legally or illegally, lives in constant fear, including himself, of being profiled by Donald Trump. What a weird statement. There's no way that's true. But to people who've decided they hate the president and want communism, it sounds true enough, and that's all that matters.
You know, I've been clear that I'm proud of our sanctuary city status. It is a status that we have had in this city for decades. It's also a status that, when there's the conviction of more than 170 serious crimes, does allow for coordination with the federal government on that. However, beyond that, that is something that we have made clear. We are not going to allow this city to become the civil immigration enforcement arm of a federal government.
When does that happen in this sanctuary city? I would like a specific example of when dangerous fugitives have been turned over to ICE by the Mamdani administration for committing any sort of crime. Haven't heard one yet. And you know what? The candidates the mayor is endorsing have beliefs that go even further than what he's saying. They don't believe in deportations at all. Under any circumstances, even if the person being deported has a dangerous criminal history. They want our justice system to deal with this. And then they want that person made a legal resident of America. Watch.
Under normal circumstances, undocumented defendants charged with crimes go through the system, and if convicted, they get deported before or after serving time. Ms. Chevalier, you recently said on WNYC Radio that defendants who commit crimes should not be deported after serving time. Why is that?
Because we have a criminal system. It's an imperfect system. It's an imperfect criminal system that I've been critical of, but we have one. And if we truly believe in a system where we don't have double jeopardy on the basis of where someone was born, then we cannot also have a system of punishment that is unique to people who were born elsewhere. We need to make sure that if we really value equality in this country, that we are treating people equally, regardless.
That is such a ridiculous statement. These people, they want to reward criminals who've come here illegally and then committed another crime with permanent residency. That's bizarre. They want somebody to come here and do something, rob a store, rob CVS, and then get hauled before a court, get convicted, get their misdemeanor slap on the wrist, and then now they can stay forever. That is totally antithetical to law and order. That is totally against the idea of America being a sovereign nation. But these are New York's representatives. These are the people that are headed to Congress to help run America. They might even be on intelligence committees. And this is going to be an absolute disaster for this city itself, where voters want more of this, not less.
Mamdani had 3 races to run, and they're going not against Republicans, against Hakeem Jeffries and establishment Democrats, and he won all 3. And these are extreme candidates. These aren't just a candidate with more charisma, less charisma, different stances on spending. This is dramatic. In fact, Mamdani, they write this in the New York Times. The outcome will only force a Democratic Party already searching for an identity to reckon with an ascendant, unapologetic left, they should say socialist, in endorsing challengers to longtime incumbents. The mayor directly took on Hakeem Jeffries, a Brooklyn native who hopes to become the next Speaker of the House and represents the Democratic establishment. Neither Valdez nor Avila Chevalier have committed to backing the congressman in his bid for Speaker should Democrats win back the majority in November.
Yeah, but
what are they saying?
But here's the thing. Even if the Democrats win the House, Hakeem Jeffries is not going to be Speaker.
Look, the problem that you have here is the people that are taking over the Democrat Party and are taking over New York City do not want anything to do with America whatsoever. And the Democrat Party doesn't really have much of an identity. And this is their new identity, an anti-American agenda. And these people, it's not like they're voting differently. Are they radical candidates? Yes. But the only difference between them and the people who are Democrats today is they're just not hiding it anymore. What's different about how they're going to vote? Are the Democrats now voting for a closed, secure border? No, they don't want to see anybody get deported either. They want everyone to be able to stay here forever. They don't think that somebody that Trump wants to deport is actually a criminal. And if Trump says somebody's a gang member who's got an MS-13 tattoo, they say, nope, that person's not a gang member. That person's a Maryland father. They should be able to stay here forever. So the voting's not going to change. The only difference is there is zero apology about it. And these candidates, they might take things a step further.
To vanquish Trump's fascism, to abolish ICE, and to stand up to the billionaires.
Stand up to the billionaires.
ICE, free Palestine. Organize your union. And join DSA.
What we have delivered here today is a clear mandate that the era of taking a check and cashing a check and calling it representation is over.
This is crazy. And you hear all of this applause for what? For doing things that make America more dangerous and less safe. If you're going to tell criminals they can break the law and live in your city and hide from the federal government, that is going to encourage criminals to come here. And when those criminals come here, these very same people, they want to see them do something, get released, and then get to stay here forever. So they want a reward system for illegal immigration. And they want to bring that reward system not just to the sanctuary that is New York, which is now full of gang activity, which has gangs in Brooklyn and Queens and all over the place wreaking havoc on our streets. They want to bring this, what's happening here, to the entire country. And that's something that people here have to realize is a big problem. If you're not going to go vote, if you're not going to participate in your elections, well, guess what? These people, they're going to get out there and participate. They're going to vote. They're going to do everything they can to win.
New York is New York. It's definitely it's the media capital, the financial capital. It is a bellwether like no other city is in this country. So don't tell me that who the mayor of New York is doesn't matter.
Let me play devil's
than
advocate for a second. Do you think, let's say, on the seize the means of production, do you think that the mayor, that one person, if he is a democratic socialist, do you think that he would have the power and influence to be able to usher in socialism?
He definitely has the power and influence to elect J.D. Vance or whoever is the Republican candidate next time. It is a walking commercial for the Republican Party
I think
nationally.
the Republicans are going to.
When you let the Democrat socialists, and now they're actually calling themselves socialists, when you let them take over a major American city, this is what you get. The state-run grocery stores, which work so well in Cuba.
Right.
And
He's got a very good point here, because as the people in New York City cheer and applaud and go full-on communist and just want more and more and more of this radicalism, it is music to their ears. The more that happens here in New York City, the more people that live outside of New York City are going to look at this and say, you know what, these radical candidates, I don't know if I want to vote for these people. I don't know if I want this party picking my president. I don't know if I want this party controlling U.S. foreign policy. What do you think would happen to U.S. foreign policy if people like this were running it? Do you think we would have more regimes in the world pursuing a path that might be dangerous to the rest of the world, or less of those? What do you think that would mean for world peace and world safety and the safety of our country? Because remember, America is the enemy of many of these regimes that are out there and this political parties.
This is your victory. What you all have shown this evening, whether for state assembly, state senate, or Congress, is that a year ago, it was not the end of a political movement. It was the beginning. And let's hear it for a politics that will never forget working people. For a politics that is ready to write a new chapter in our party's history.
Well, how does socialism never forget working people? It eliminates the businesses that those working people had jobs at. So what do you mean this is a politics that doesn't forget working people? Perhaps what he means is that it remembers them all right, because it's going to bring them into the cold embrace of communism and totally change their life forever, which apparently is what the people in New York City want, because they are all in on this. And when you look on stage here and you remember the radical beliefs these individuals have espoused, which got them elected, this is the walking, talking commercial that Bill Maher is talking about for the Republican Party. And how do you think this is going to affect people who might live in a swing state like Pennsylvania that elected Fetterman? Do you think somebody that comes in there and is essentially a clone of Karl Marx is going to resonate with average people who do not want communism? This could be a massive disaster for this political party on a national scale. And what you could end up having are these hotspots of socialism: New York City, Los Angeles, Chicago, and then the rest of the country, Portland, Oregon, of course. But then the rest of the country is like, I don't want this. We've got Venezuela, we've got Cuba, we've got these regime governments all over the place destroying these major American cities. I'm going to vote against that where I live.
Once posted on Twitter that she forgot napkins, so she wiped her hands on the American flag, and she and the others are poised to be sitting members of Congress. What is your reaction to this, and why the socialist movement is growing right now?
Well, there's no getting around it that this was a very good night for the DSA, for the Democrat Socialists of America. And I think what should concern everyone is that this is a growing movement. Remember, the DSA has grown 10% in membership since February.
Oh, wow.
They have been chalking up wins at the local and county level in red states like Arizona, Kansas, Iowa. So these congressional seats are simply the next step in the process of them consolidating power and becoming less of a fringe movement on the left than moving towards becoming what is now the establishment Democratic Party.
That's exactly what's happening. But Who is to blame for this? You know who it is? It would be the public school system in this country, because the public school system in this country has taught people for long enough now that America is evil and America is unjust and America is rigged and capitalism doesn't work. And if you come from an average upbringing, there's no way you'll get ahead. There's no way you'll ever be president. There's no way you'll ever start a business. The deck is rigged against you. Therefore, you should hate every single thing about this country and actively rise up to resist it. We've indoctrinated people with that belief system, and now they're old enough to vote. Who are they voting for? Are they going to vote for a system they've been taught their entire life by their parents and their teachers is a rigged system that only allows somebody who's rich like Jeff Bezos to get ahead, even though he started Amazon decades ago in a closet somewhere with an internet connection over dial-up? These are not people who support the American dream. They don't think it exists, because they've been lied to and they've been harmed by their upbringing, and now they're bringing that upbringing to the ballot box. But President Trump says the communists are finally making their move. I've been waiting and preparing for this for a long time. It's easy to be a communist. All you have to do is say, I'll give you everything. And then he says that this ideology has not worked for thousands of years and that he's ready and it's going to be a show. And you have proof of this. Remember this? Remember Trump meeting with Mamdani in the Oval Office, and everybody was so shocked about this. They said, oh, how could Trump meet Mamdani in the Oval Office? How could he do this? How could he hang out with such a communist in the Oval? Oh, this is crazy. This is not making any sense. Well, it does make sense, because during this meeting, which happened a year ago, Trump made him the face of the Democrat Party. He was not meeting with Chuck Schumer. He was not meeting with Nancy Pelosi. He wasn't meeting with any of the establishment Democrats that don't have an ideology or don't have a party that just want to resist Trump. He made the communists the face of this party without them even knowing it. And they walked right into his little trap, which he knew would set America up to be radicalized against communism during a midterm election cycle. So while we see crime on the streets of New York City, while we see gangs all over the place, while we've got these takedowns in Brooklyn and in Queens, and we've got politicians that defend all this and want to see those criminals, if they're here illegally, rewarded with permanent residency in America, the president already greased the skids for the country to associate what's happening here with this party on a national scale. That is a political chess move that could pay big dividends by helping to keep our country safe and help keep criminals out of our country on a mass scale. Yes, you may still have sanctuary cities, but the idea that Americans are going to look at what's happening in New York and somehow disassociate that from what their local Democratic Socialist candidate wants to tell them, that's going to be a hard one to swallow. And everybody that wants to run against somebody like Vance or Trump or whoever that candidate is locally, they're going to have to distance themselves from this stuff. They're going to be hard-pressed to prove that they're not a Zoran Mamdani. What do you think about that? Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next video. This congresswoman desperately wants to be our next president. Listen to this.
The problem that we have is that these big companies, they think they are governments. They want to be governments. They want to have totally unchecked power. And I believe that we need to pursue antitrust. We need to break up a lot of these companies that are far too big. And we also need to be instituting consumer protection.
Apple is attributing their price increases to the chip supply and the data centers.
Yep.
Do you think the CHIPS Act that Congress passed has done enough to help consumers on this topic?
I mean, here's the thing is that...
Does she know what she's talking about?
I would say that the CHIPS Act was passed before we saw this huge development in AI. And so the CHIPS Act was really passed before data centers were a thing. So it wasn't designed to anticipate the huge amount of supply that these centers are sucking. Because of these data centers, a lot of people's electricity bills are going up, and now your ability to buy laptops, computers, iPads, electronics in general is going to go up because the data centers are sucking up all of our own industrial supply. And so, you know, we're paying in a lot of ways. We are subsidizing the development of a lot of these pieces of these AI data centers.
Is there something that Congress, you think, should do to step in and try to thwart some of these, what could be more and more price increases for consumers when it comes to these data centers?
Absolutely. I think we need to be taking a look at the supplies in these markets and making sure that everyday people aren't paying the price over and over and over again for the privatized profits of these AI companies.
She's fishing for the most emotional way to frame what is about to be a massive generator of jobs and growth for our entire country. But she wasn't done. Listen to this.
We don't, quote unquote, have the money for a better and improved social safety net because we let, like, Elon Musk gut Medicaid and gut Social Security in order for him to pay for A, his own tax cuts, and B, his own $1 billion in private federal contracts.
When did he do
this
any
guy
of that?
takes billions and billions of your tax dollars, of your public funds. They are
How did he do that? He's not a
robbing
politician.
us of the tiny slivers of what we have left in our collective public social safety net.
This sounds insane. And when people asked Trump about what you just heard, he had a response that made people's heads explode. Watch this.
Are you worried about more socialist candidates across the United
I think
States?
it's a big threat to our nation, actually. Because it's not socialism, it's really communism. They use the word social democrat because it sounds so nice, but
nope, it's not.
It's really communism you're talking about.
That's
I
right.
think it's the biggest threat to our nation there is, maybe since our founding. That includes World War I, World War II.
Wow.
I think this is the biggest threat to our nation. People will smile when I say that, but the smart people are going to say, you know, he's probably right.
He is. You know why? Because that threat is right here inside of our country, and it's been created by the brainwashing happening in our public education system. Speaking of which, New York City's mayor graduated from one of the best high schools in the Bronx, and listen to how he's doing.
This rent freeze is a disaster. It is going to destroy the economy in New York, but Zohran Mamdani probably knows this.
Maybe.
I don't think the man is unaware of Google. To get into a position of power like the mayor of New York City, you have to be smart. And that's why I don't believe these are accidents. I certainly believe these people want to burn the city down. They just use these sweet-sounding policies to do it. Put it this way. There's somebody who really hates you. So do they tell you you need to eat your vegetables, have some lean meats, and exercise? No. They tell you, why don't you just have as many donuts as you want? That person's not trying to help you. So here's what we can expect. With rent being frozen, who's going to do the maintenance? Where will the money come from to fix appliances? We've seen this before, and we will see it again. It results in slumlords.
Yep.
It results in derelict properties, but of course, that's the point. Zohran Mamdani wants to seize the properties. People in his administration have already said this. So you create the circumstance by which it's impossible to be a property owner, and then the government can come in and seize the asset in violation of the law.
Okay, he's 100% right on all that, but these diabolical plans of the communists, this is a huge problem, and they believe some of the most radical things ever. Watch this.
Do you support repealing Act 10?
Yes.
Universal child care?
Yes.
Free school meals?
Yes.
Guaranteed pay leave?
Yes.
Abolishing ICE?
Yes.
A 1-year data center moratorium?
Yes.
Breaking up Big Ag?
Yes.
Public grocery stores?
Yes.
Right to repair? Overturning Citizens United?
Yes.
A workers' bill of rights?
Yes.
A free Palestine?
Yes.
A Scott Walker statue that people can go to that are made by local artisans and craftsmen that people can slap up if they want to.
Wow.
Tentatively, yes.
Okay.
Is there anything they don't believe?
Sneak that in there. I was like, oh, we got the momentum. Like you're saying yes to everything. Maybe I could catch you.
They all believe the same stuff. And this is a big disaster for the Democrat Party. Watch.
How's he doing among
Look at
Democrats
this.
in New York, his home state? Yeah, you think that this number is bad. What about here in his home state of New York? I tell you, these numbers scream primary challenge 2 years from now. Look at this. Okay. New
He'll
York Dems who
retire.
view Chuck Schumer favorably. Again, in early 2020, it was 75%, 3 in 4 Democrats. Now it is less than half.
Wow.
Less than half of Democrats in Chuck Schumer's home state of New York. 47%
That's crazy.
who view him favorably. This is part of a larger picture in which Democrats are turning against their leadership.
Yep.
They are specifically turning against Chuck Schumer. He is actually underwater nationally with Democrats. And even in his own home state of New York, the Empire State, he can't even reach 50% favorable rating.
Because 50% or more of the people here want communism 100% of the way. And they're sick and tired of voting for people who are hiding from the idea that they're communists.
You know, there's been a lot of attention. One of the candidates you supported, who won, who knocked off an incumbent Democrat, is Darlisa Villa-Chevalier.
Oh,
said some
she's
very
a treasure.
things, including calling for the abolition of prisons. Couldn't say whether or not somebody who had committed murder should be in prison, called for open borders against all deportations, including those of violent criminals.
No deportations.
Are those positions that the Democratic Party could win on nationally?
Listen to this.
I think what the Democratic Party can win on nationally is a focus on working people. And I think that what I saw from Darlisa when I would walk the streets of her district was a focus on what she describes as a politics of life.
Yeah.
She would talk about how we have to invest in babies, not bombs. She's now going to represent what is one of the poorest districts in the United States of America. And what people in that district are exhausted by is a politics that has justified the spending of tens of billions of dollars while working people are struggling just to do the basics.
But how does abolishing prisons or having open borders?
That's the thing they do not want to talk about. But this is a radical agenda. People do not want to hide from this stuff. They want to be out in the open now about their communism. They want to wear it on their sleeve. They want to be proud of it. They want to be revolutionaries that are coming for capitalism and want to tear it down and destroy it. And this is the threat that Trump's talking about. But just before we continue, now it's time for a paid advertisement from Rumble Wallet. Question: how much control do you have over your money right now? Technology has changed everything, and now it's changing how money works. Crypto started as a niche, but now it's going mainstream. Faster payments, more control, fewer middlemen. This isn't hype. This is where things are going, and getting started is easier than you might think. With Rumble Wallet, you can buy Bitcoin, you can hold dollar-backed stable coins, and you can even buy digital gold on the blockchain. All in one place. Rumble Wallet is a non-custodial digital wallet, which means you, not a bank or a platform, control access to all your funds. Setup is simple. It connects with MoonPay, so you can use your debit card, credit card, or bank account to get set up and be running within minutes. And for a limited time, you can start your wallet off with $10 in US stablecoin USAT by downloading the Rumble Wallet app and entering my exclusive promo code CashJordan10 when you sign up right now. You can even use Rumble Wallet to support your favorite creators, possibly even me. So do this right now. Scan the QR code, which is right here on the screen, or visit wallet.rumble.com/CashJordan. That link will also be in the description of this video. From there, you can set up your wallet and get your $10 in US stablecoin with this promo code. This is a limited time offer, so act now. Take control of your money. Get started with Rumble Wallet today. Terms and conditions apply. See the description below or visit rumble.com/promo official rules for details.
Fit into that. I mean, do you see how those are ideas that a lot of your Democrats that are warning about what happened here say are toxic. Most of America won't go along with it. Are bad ideas. They're dangerous ideas.
Yeah.
I think what the focus of her race was, what the focus of her candidacy was about the struggle that working people are facing.
But she believes those crazy things.
How much of a danger do you think this new breed of communism is here in America?
I'm very concerned. I don't think my father and my uncle would recognize the Democratic Party today.
Now, here's the thing that everybody who's been watching politics already knows. The Democrat socialists, they're going to vote the same way the progressives and the liberals have been voting. The voting to abolish ICE and get rid of deportations isn't going to change. The only thing that's going to change is whether or not these candidates hide their hatred of capitalism in America any longer or not. Which, as you're about to see, means the attacks are going to get even worse. Watch.
It's under attack by a Democratic Party establishment that has folded like a house of cards, like a cheap suit, like wet cardboard, under the pressure of these communists. And it's going to be pro-Western conservatives, and maybe, if they exist, a handful of pro-Western liberals who defend against
Fetterman.
These people who hate the West and hate America.
You said Mamdani was not the future of the party. Do you regret those statements?
I think the future of the party is diverse, and it's anchored in the fact that we've got candidates all across the country who are running to take back control of the House of Representatives so we can end the national nightmare that's taken place. Mayor Mamdani,
his life is a nightmare.
As mayor. We have a good working
because
relationship, and
it's
that will continue
being
moving forward.
challenged.
The
by
NRCC
the
dropped out
communists.
flowers at your office this morning and condolences for the candidates that you endorsed that lost. Do you have any reaction to that?
The interesting thing is that the NRCC
This is why.
and Republicans spent millions of dollars trying to pick Mike Lawler's opponent, and they failed miserably. And Kate Conley, who's now the Democratic nominee, is going to take Mike Lawler out in November. And we're going to take back control of the House of Representatives.
And then finally, do you have any comment? Are you concerned at all about a primary challenge in 2 years from a Mamdani endorsed candidate?
When you ask me a serious question, I'll give you a serious answer.
Why do you think
Oh, not serious. Not taking Mamdani seriously. Listen, better put his seatbelt on because Mamdani's the leader of the party now. Mamdani and AOC. But why is this party, this Democrat party, turning full communism? Why would they be doing that?
You know, among Republicans, 93% are extremely or very proud. Just a single one, say they have little to no pride in being an American. But look over at the Democratic side. This is where we've seen this extremely or very number. It's been taking a tumble at 27%,
Wow.
which is way different than the 93. You do the
They
quick
hate our
math with me here.
country.
What is that? That's a 66-point difference here in terms of extremely or very. But look at this. The little or no proud to be an American actually among Democrats eclipses is greater than the extremely
That's
or
crazy.
very proud number. So we are just living in such a different universe if you're a Republican versus a Democrat.
And that's why you have two choices now at the ballot box. Communism, which brings starvation and poverty, or capitalism, which rescues people from starvation and poverty, and has ever since it's been allowed to happen, whereas socialism has failed everywhere it's been allowed to be tried or has been forced upon people. But you have to hate America and America's economic system to want to vote for these people.
Use the word social democrat because it sounds so nice, but it's really communism you're talking about. I mean, he is ridiculous, but the reason he's using communism is because he knows socialism is really popular. So he's trying to turn this into communism when he knows that the ideas that social democrats are running on, that progressives are running on, universal health care, universal child care, making sure that people get paid higher wages, those are incredibly popular. So he's trying to attach an ideology to it, a label that isn't correct.
Okay, so the Democrat Party would have you believe that socialism does not lead to communism and that the two couldn't be further apart and that one is completely acceptable and completely popular, not because free stuff is popular, but because it actually works, even though they can't tell us where it works. Socialism is an economic political philosophy where the means of production are owned and regulated collectively by the public or the state rather than private individuals. Communism is a political and economic ideology that advocates for the abolition of private property and the creation of a classless, stateless society. In this system, the public owns all major resources and production. I mean, look, you're going to have a tough time differentiating these two ideologies. Is communism further to the left than socialism? Yes, but not by much. And what we're witnessing in America is that liberalism led us to progressivism, which led us to socialism, and that's only going to lead to one thing.
When you put in communist and communist policies, that's what Zohran Mamdani is talking about.
He's not a communist.
It never works.
Socialist. He says he's Democratic.
I can't tell what the difference is.
Well, he can describe
explain what the difference is.
He can describe the differences for you. The socialism is not the same basis of communism in this country. You know that quite well.
The man wants to create government-run grocery stores. He wants free transportation, both of which are impossible to do.
Right. The people telling you that they're socialists and not communists because there's nothing to worry about, they can't tell you what the difference is. They want communism, and they're only socialists because that's the biggest step they can take in the left direction. And look, there's a fundamental problem electing people president who do not understand anything about how our country works, what made it great, and how capitalism works. Just take, for example, all of this hatred of the idea of AI data centers and high prices for things like Apple products. When you see high prices in a market because of something like RAM, that signals to companies that don't make RAM yet for smartphones that, hey, if you start making this thing and the price has doubled, you're going to be able to get into this market and make a whole bunch of money. So industry is going to come into this. High prices just signal that there are changes ahead in the economy. But what these people want to do, they want to break up these businesses. They want to cap prices. Everything they want to do is going to lead to shortages and a starvation, if you will, of parts for iPhones. And then nobody's going to have iPhones, and nobody's going to be able to go on the internet and follow people like AOC and Zoran Mamdani and complain about capitalism, because the real problem here is that they do not understand how capitalism works. They don't understand that high prices are temporary. High prices go away once everybody jumps on the bandwagon and starts making the thing that now costs 3 to 4 times as much. Those prices are going to come down. It's going to take a little bit of time. It's not going to be tomorrow. And then here's the other problem that I have with all this. You've got people that said a year ago, oh, AI, it's going to suck all these jobs out of our economy. We're not going to have anybody working. This is the end of the world. But then when there's all these data centers getting built and there's all these jobs that revolve around AI, oh no, shut it down. We don't want you to have a job that was created by AI. Oh no, we don't want you to have a job in a booming industry in a massive area of growth for our entire country. And by the way, even if every single thing that somebody like AOC says they want comes true, no data centers, capped prices, this and that, what's going to happen? The companies that are selling the parts that make the iPhone, where are they going to sell those parts to? They're just going to sell it to non-American companies that want to build AI data centers, right? So the parts aren't going to be available. Somebody else is just going to buy them. AI is sticking around, and you better win this race or you're going to get left behind in a big way. And that's why there is so much focus on this. So capping prices, banning data centers, big deal. They're still going to show up. The parts are still not going to be on the shelf. Phones are still going to cost more until, again, businesses and other companies get in on the action and prices come down. That's what's happening with oil right now. What do you think about that? See you in the next video.
Meanwhile, closer to home, the Trump administration taking out a major threat to our homeland with a successful strike in Venezuela.
So, in a historic first, the United States just took down a cartel compound in Venezuela. And in another historic first, it was the Venezuelan government who told the U.S. military where the bad guys were hiding, something other governments all across Central and South America are also starting to do. Which means if you're a criminal, this is the wrong side of planet Earth for you.
President Trump says the United States has eliminated the leader of Tren de Aragua. The president says the U.S. Southern Command delivered a strike coordinated, quote, with our friends in Venezuela, with whom we are working very well.
Gang known as Tren de Aragua.
The Trump administration designating Tren de Aragua as a foreign terrorist organization. Federal prosecutors in New York charging Guerrero last year. He's named as a co-conspirator in the indictment against former Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro.
Are we expecting, or should we anticipate at some point in the not too distant future, the United States to take action against the cartels in Mexico?
I think you're seeing action taken against these cartels, right, in the Caribbean and the Southern Pacific by our U.S. military. So you're seeing the will of this president and his influence over the world.
This is a huge deal. I mean, they invited our military in, and we were able to identify where he was. And President Trump had the foresight to seize Maduro, change the relationship. We have a totally different energy dynamic around the world, by the way.
Check this out. Venezuelan oil exports are rising, and this is not going to stop anytime soon. Also, what nobody's talking about is this entire move right here, reopening Venezuela. This is going to remap the entire planet in ways nobody thought would ever happen, especially the criminals, because for decades, the one thing holding back Central and South America has been the rise of organized militants, who America's enemies say are the fault our country. They say the cartels only exist because America exists. And they say illegal immigration only happens because America won't open its border, not because the wrong people have found a way to profit from it. But now leaders over here have banded together to end decades of mayhem. And now the gangs and criminals that we've been told were just a part of life and we're always going to be here, well, now they have no country where they can hide in and find sanctuary. There is no safe haven for a base or some sort of criminal operation that requires any sort of infrastructure. And think of what a nightmare this is for these guys who were making $13 billion a year off the US border when it was open and have had no problem creating no-go zones in countries like Mexico and in Venezuela and in Colombia, destroying the lives of the law-abiding everywhere they operate. But that brings us to the real reason operations like what we just saw in Venezuela are taking place. The US government has decided to finally do something about crime in our country and in other countries, and leaders who represent people who are absolutely sick of this are 100% on board. And now we're seeing that folks who once fled cartels and gangs in their home countries are deciding to go back, as law and order is now running the streets in their hometowns, giving the law-abiding everywhere a chance to better their own lives and get ahead. And if you've really got a heart of compassion, instead of opening the US border, which just empowers these criminals, why not support the United States making things better for the law-abiding where they live by working legally or starting a business? Everyone in America should be in favor of what Venezuela just did, which just a few months ago was completely unthinkable. Watch.
President Trump says the United States has eliminated the leader of Tren de Aragua. The president says the U.S. Southern Command delivered a strike. The president says the U.S. coordinated, quote, with our friends in Venezuela, with whom we are working very well. And that, quote, as a result, Tren de Aragua no longer have safe haven in Venezuela or anywhere else.
So here you have a country which used to be run by a communist dictatorship with a cartel leader sitting atop it. And now things are totally different. They're working with the United States. Freedom is coming to the people of Venezuela in a way that it hasn't for a long time, and self-determination and the prospect of financial independence, something this country has been deprived of. And as you're about to see, this has huge implications for the way the world economy works and will work in the near future. Watch.
I mean, think about that. President Trump had the foresight to seize Maduro, change the relationship. We have a totally different energy dynamic around the world. By the way energy flows today, the Straits will be nowhere near as relevant 1 to 2 years from now. Because of the foresight of President Trump, he's made us energy independent at home. We're a net exporter. Now Venezuela, through our partnerships.
Let me ask you a question. Why does Venezuela, which has the largest proven oil reserves in the entire world, not look like some of America's Gulf allies? Why is the wealth over in the Middle East not present in Venezuela? Simple. It's been stolen by criminals for years. And now that's changing. And the entire world is going to benefit from this. Not just the people of Venezuela who've been living in poverty and have been subject to corruption and criminal activity, but everybody who wants to buy those resources. This is going to lower prices for people all across the globe. It's going to make life more affordable, and it's going to bring people out of poverty. Poverty that stuck around for too long because criminals had the wealth of this country firmly in their grasp, which they used to enrich themselves while their people lived in some of the most dire conditions anywhere on earth. But is oil the only resource that Venezuela has, which is still in the hands of criminals, or is there something else?
The gold mines of Las Claritas are controlled by affiliates of the gang known as Tren de Aragua.
Oh!
At least they were until the major military operation, which has left many towns and mines deserted.
Wow.
It's a ghost town. People are leaving. President Donald Trump claimed the gang was working with President Nicolas Maduro as justification for capturing him in January. Ties have warmed under interim leader Delcy Rodriguez. In areas like Las Claritas, her government's expected to grant new licenses to multinationals which haven't operated since the 2000s.
Wow. So this territory was controlled by gangs, and it's full of gold and other natural resources, and people have been living in poverty, working for criminal organizations, and now that's going to end. Now the wealth of this country is going to come out of it in ways never seen before, and this is going to take people who are living with nothing. These are people who are starving. It is going to give them a new future that wasn't possible 6 months ago while Maduro, who was a cartel leader, was sitting pretty in his criminal empire instead of in a New York jail where he belongs. And you know what the other problem is with all of this? Remember, Venezuela, Iran, Cuba, these three countries are part of a regime support apparatus that benefits countries like Russia, who back them. And together, what do? They help each other evade U.S. sanctions. They trade natural resources that are held by a corrupt criminal government in one country to a corrupt criminal government in another country. Oil was going back and forth from Venezuela and Iran. It was getting refined. It was being delivered to Cuba. These countries were keeping themselves afloat. And once Venezuela changed, the entire Jenga blocks tower of regime support crumbled and collapsed. That's why we are seeing so many changes in these three countries right now. And this is good news for the law-abiding, because the law-abiding don't benefit anywhere where the resources of their country are extracted from it and they get nothing for it.
People here don't care Donald Trump, don't care Delcy Rodriguez. People are on survival.
Survival mode.
Yeah.
Survival mode all day.
It's so interesting because, of course, you're exactly right. And now I remember just 3 years ago having to learn about Tren-de-Aragua because it was such a new thing. But tell us about the organization itself. Is the organization itself built so that this leader can be replaced?
Okay, so before we get into that, understand that Tren-de-Aragua totally blows the narrative that cartels and criminal activity are the fault of the United States and that this is just how the world works. That narrative, Tren-de-Aragua blows it out of the water because they're a new gang. When they first started coming into the United States during the asylum crisis, people weren't really sure what they were. Law enforcement didn't really know how to identify them. What they were going to do once they got here remained to be seen. Now we know, but these guys are a new threat. They sprang up overnight. And why did that happen? Did that happen because the United States exists? Or did that happen because they were living in a country where Nicolas Maduro allowed them to escape from prison, a prison which they were running, by the way, in Aragua, which is where their name comes from, and then flood the rest of our hemisphere with state-sponsored mayhem. That's what happened here. If you have sanctuaries for criminals, crime is only going to increase. You don't stamp out crime by ignoring it, as progressives and socialists love to tell us, and by saying, oh, well, that's just how that country works. Just leave them alone. United States is an evil country. What right do we have to tell some country like Venezuela what to do? No, if you have criminals that are somewhere getting help from their government, and then they leave that country and commit crime elsewhere, that's a problem for the entire world.
Venezuelan authorities confirming their part in the operation, intelligence sharing, and technical support.
Gang known as Tren-de-Aragua.
The Trump administration designating Tren-de-Aragua as a foreign terrorist organization. Federal prosecutors in New York charging Guerrero last year. He's named as a co-conspirator in the indictment against former Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro, who was captured and brought to the U.S. in January to face.
So these guys were playing on the same team, the dictator of Venezuela and these criminal gang leaders. But think of what a massive development this is. Just 6 months ago, the idea of Venezuela not being a sanctuary for criminals wasn't on anyone's radar, especially the bad guys, and especially the people who've accepted a dangerous status quo that ruins our entire hemisphere and steals from the law-abiding in places like Venezuela. But now the government of this country is on the right side of history. And how did that happen? Did it happen by accident, or did it happen because America exists and decided to finally do something about it? You see, this is where the idea of American leadership comes in. Had the U.S. done nothing but allow Nicolas Maduro to continue getting rich, we wouldn't be talking about any of this. The country of Venezuela would still fail to benefit its own people because it is stolen from them each and every day by a despotic regime of criminals and gangs who run the place and flood other countries in Central and South America and try to come into the United States and do things like take over apartment buildings. This whole thing was unsustainable. But Venezuela is not the only country right now that is being looked at for potential military action. Watch this.
And including in Mexico, how they're going to do more and are doing more than we've ever seen before.
That includes, as we just heard, on land in Mexico?
Well, on land, you have a 95% reduction in illegal activity in between the ports that the Border Patrol is seeing every day. So that's almost a 100% increase in the capability on, like in the first days of this administration. That capability increases every single day, right? More hours on patrol, more equipment to sense activity. All of those things are leading to a safer border. And this policy change with no releases in over 13 months at the border of people that came in illegally.
Well, and the numbers reflect that success.
You know what's so fascinating about this? Here we have the common sense solution to criminals running rampant. Do something about it. Arrest the bad guys. Patrol the area. Make sure nobody's playing games doing things that are illegal. And what happened? What did he just say? A massive reduction in the number of people who are doing things, the above ground operations of these criminal organizations, those are just vanishing. Why? Because the criminals now fear a consequence. There was no consequence before. for these gangs and criminals to do anything. The only consequence for them was if they didn't do anything, some other criminal group would take away an opportunity from them, would conquer territory, would make all kinds of money illegally. That's the consequence. So previously, they were rewarded for their criminal behavior. Now they face a consequence for it. That's a good thing for people who aren't criminals. Speaking of which, look at what Venezuela allowed to happen, which turbocharged this Tren de Aragua group to begin with.
Guerrero has escaped from this Venezuelan prison at least twice, and even from the inside, according to State Department filings, expanded the gang Tren de Aragua's influence transnationally, controlling gold mines and border crossings between Venezuela and Colombia.
Wow. So not only was this gang allowed to run rampant and take over a prison, after they were able to get out of this prison, what did they do? They created a transnational criminal enterprise. Now, does that sound like something that can happen in a country that has itself under control? Does that sound like it can happen in a country where the people running it exist in opposition to gangs and criminals like that? Or is it something that can only happen if you get help and if you're allowed to do it? That's what we were witnessing here. We're witnessing cartels and gangs running a country in South America, which made everything worse for South America. And of course, if that's the situation, if that's the status quo, people are going to flee these countries. People are going to want to live somewhere else. People are going to be willing to break immigration law and come to America, even if Trump's the president, because